The ancient temple on P4X 639 shouldn't have existed. Dr. Daniel Jackson knelt before the stone pedestal, brushing dust from glyphs that predated the Goa'uld by millennia, his breath fogging in the cold air. The structure rose from a planet that showed no signs of Stargate activity in 10,000 years, no Naquata mines, no servant populations, no systematic resource extraction. Just this singular building, its architecture matching nothing in the ancient database, waiting. Carter, these energy readings make sense to you? Colonel Jack O'Neill's voice echoed through the chamber, P-90 trained on shadows that moved wrong in their flashlight beams. Major Samantha Carter frowned at her scanner, tapping it twice. Sir, the power signature is off the charts. It's not Naquata-based, not even similar to ancient technology. It's organic somehow. Like the temple itself is alive. Indeed, TLC rumbled from his position guarding the entrance. I sense a presence here. It is not Goa'uld, yet it watches. Daniel's hands trembled as he traced the final glyph, a serpent consuming its own tail, surrounded by characters he recognized from a dozen Earth mythologies. Japanese, Celtic, Mesopotamian, all saying the same thing in their own tongues. Balance. Judgment. The Earth's will. Jack, I think this isn't an ancient facility. I think it's a prison. Well, that's just fantastic. O'Neill moved closer, studying the pedestal's crystalline surface. What's in the box, Daniel? Not a box. A seal. Daniel stood, his archaeological excitement warring with growing dread. The ancients didn't build this place. They found something here and locked it away. Look, these outer glyphs are ancient, but they're warning markers, not construction notes. That which judges the balance must not walk among the stars. Carter's scanner shrieked. Sir, the energy levels just spiked. Whatever's in there is reacting to our presence. The temple shuddered. Dust cascaded from the vaulted ceiling as light blazed through the glyphs, no longer stone gray but burning with colors that shouldn't exist, green that tasted like thunderstorms, red that smelled like spilled blood, blue that hummed with the ocean's rage. The serpent symbol lifted from the pedestal, rotating in three-dimensional space, and Daniel saw it clearly now. Not a serpent. A cycle. Creation and destruction, forever intertwined. Everybody out. O'Neill grabbed Daniel's arm. We're calling this one into Hammond before. The pedestal exploded. Not with force, but with presence. Energy erupted upward in a column that punched through the temple ceiling and lanced into the sky, visible for miles. The Stargate outside activated without dialing, chevrons locking in sequence that Carter's mind catalogued even as she ran, impossible combinations, addresses that shouldn't work, gates connecting in patterns the network was never designed to allow. And through the connection, consciousness flooded. SG-1 stumbled from the temple as the wormhole's event horizon shimmered, not the usual blue but shot through with emerald veins. The MALP they'd left by the gate sparked and died, its circuits frying. TLC raised his staff weapon, O'Neill aimed his P-90, Carter desperately worked her scanner, and Daniel simply stared. Because something was stepping through. Not walking. Manifesting. The figure that emerged from the Stargate had no fixed form, now male, now female, now something beyond human categorization entirely. Energy writhed around it like living serpents, and where its feet touched the ground, grass erupted through stone that had been barren for millennia. Its eyes, when they focused on SG-1, held the weight of epochs. You have broken the seal, it said, and its voice was whined through forests, tectonic plates grinding, species going extinct in the dark. I am Orochi. I am Gaia's will. I am the balance that humanity has forgotten, and I have awakened to find my world scattered among the stars. The entity tilted its head, studying them with terrible curiosity. You are not the ancients who imprisoned me. You are younger. Weaker. Yet you carry their tools and walk their roads. Its gaze fell on the Stargate. You have made the galaxy your garden, spreading like the civilization I was born to judge. How many worlds do you consume? How many ecosystems do you disrupt with your endless hunger? We're explorers, Daniel said, stepping forward despite O'Neill's hissed warning. We're trying to protect Earth from Earth. The word stopped Daniel cold. Orochi's form solidified slightly, and for a moment looked almost human, young, androgynous, with hair that moved like windswept grain. My Earth. The world whose voice I speak, whose pain I feel. You have abandoned her to spread across the void, and in doing so, you repeat the cycle that necessitates my existence. Its form began to flicker, destabilizing. But I cannot maintain coherence in this reality. The laws here are different. The ancients' prison altered me, separated me from the source of my power. I require, it focused on them with sudden, desperate intensity. I require a vessel. A willing merger with one who understands the necessity of balance. Oh hell no, O'Neill said. We've got enough problems with snakes crawling into people's heads. You're not. I am not Goa'uld. Orochi's voice carried offended dignity. Those parasites who pretend to divinity are abominations, false gods who enslave. I do not conquer. I merge. I offer partnership with the Earth's judgment itself. But without a host attuned to this universe's physics, I will dissipate, and the balance will remain unguarded. The entity swayed, its form flickering like a flame in high wind. Choose. Offer me a vessel willingly, or I will be forced to take one. And if I must act without consent, I will be no better than the false gods you fight. Carter's mind raced through the implications. An entity claiming to be Earth's will, possessing power that made her scanner useless, stepping through an impossible gate connection. Either this was the most elaborate Goa'uld trick she'd ever seen, or they'd just released something that predated human civilization itself. Sir, she said quietly, we need to get back to the SGC. Hammond needs to know about this before we make any decisions about. Orochi collapsed to its knees, energy bleeding away into the ground. Where it touched, flowers bloomed and immediately withered, a time-lapse of seasons in seconds. Decide quickly, children of Earth. I fade. And when I am gone, the judgment I represent fades with me. The galaxy will continue its consumption unopposed, and the balance your ancestors understood will be forgotten completely. Its eyes met Daniel's. You read the warnings. You know what I am. Will you help me, or will you let nature's voice fall silent among the stars? The Stargate remained active behind them, that impossible connection holding. And through it, Daniel could have sworn he heard something. Voices, maybe, or the rustle of 8 heads rising from ancient sleep, awakened by their deity's return. O'Neill lowered his P90, just slightly. Carter, dial home. Now. We're bringing this situation to Hammond before anybody does anything stupid. He glared at Orochi. And you, whatever you are, you're coming with us. Under guard. No possessing, no judging, no flower growing until we figure out what the hell we're actually dealing with. As you wish, Orochi whispered, its form barely cohesive now. But know this, Colonel of Earth's warriors, I have already felt your Stargate network. I know how many worlds you touch. How many ecosystems altered by your presence. The ancients sealed me to prevent judgment upon their own expansion. Will you prove yourselves different, or merely repeat their mistakes? The entity's eyes closed as Carter's frantic dialing sequence locked the 7th chevron. The wormhole shifted, routing to Earth, to Cheyenne Mountain, to the SGC gate room where alarms would already be screaming. And as SG-1 prepared to bring a primordial deity through the Stargate, Daniel Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that Orochi's question was the one that mattered most. Not whether they could contain this power, but whether they deserved to. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Indeed. The SGC gate room erupted into controlled chaos the moment SG-1 stepped through with their impossible guest. Klaxons blared as security teams poured in, weapons trained on the flickering entity that barely maintained cohesion between Carter and Daniel. The iris had stayed open on General Hammond's direct order. Carter's urgent radio transmission from P4X-639 had been clear enough. Possible ancient-era entity. Non-hostile but unstable. Request immediate containment protocols. What Hammond saw now, through the control room's reinforced glass, defied every protocol in the SGC handbook. Orochi swayed on the ramp, its form rippling between states of matter, solid, then translucent, then nearly invisible before solidifying again. Energy bled from it in waves that made the gate room's lights flicker and the Naquata generators whine in sympathetic resonance. Where its feet touched the metal ramp, frost patterns spread and melted in rapid succession, seasons compressing into heartbeats. "Stand down," Hammond's voice boomed through the intercom. "SG-1, escort your guest to isolation room 3. Dr. Fraser, prep your medical team but maintain distance. I want hazmat protocols in effect until we understand what we're dealing with." O'Neill guided Orochi forward with his P-90 still at low ready, not quite pointing but absolutely prepared. "You heard the general. Nice and easy. We've got a room where you can rest, stabilize, whatever it is you need to do that doesn't involve possessing my people. Your caution is wise, Colonel." Orochi's voice wavered, weaker than it had been on P4X-639. "But unnecessary. I do not have the strength for coercion." The entity stumbled. TLC caught it reflexively, then jerked back as energy surged through his arm. His symbiote pouch glowed briefly, and his eyes widened. "This being speaks truth. I sense no gold deception, no desire to dominate. Only," he struggled for words, "exhaustion. And sorrow deeper than I have known." TLC. Carter moved closer, scanner active despite knowing it would show nothing useful. "What did you feel?" "The death of worlds." TLC's voice carried unusual emotion. "Not by conquest. By imbalance. I felt ecosystems collapse, species vanish, the slow suffocation of planets. And I felt rage, not at humanity, but on behalf of life itself." Hammond's voice cut through. "Get it secured. We'll debrief in 20 minutes. The isolation room was a converted holding cell, originally designed for captured gold. Ancient-based force field, Naquata-reinforced walls, independent life support. Orochi examined it with what might have been amusement as the shimmering barrier activated. Another cage. The ancients also feared what I represent. The entity settled onto the floor in a meditative posture, and its form finally stabilized into something approximating a young human, features androgynous, hair the color of leaves changing with seasons, eyes that held verdant depths. "But at least you ask questions before imprisoning. That is, progress." Through the observation window, Daniel studied the being while Carter took readings and O'Neill maintained vigilant watch. The translation of the temple glyphs kept cycling through Daniel's mind. Judgment. Balance. Earth's will. Every mythology he'd studied spoke of nature gods, of forces that predated civilization, of checks against human expansion. Was this actually one of those primordial entities, or something using his own academic knowledge against him? "Tell us what you are," Daniel said through the intercom. "No riddles, no philosophy. Just truth." Orochi's eyes met his through the barrier. "I am what Earth creates when humanity forgets its place. Every 1,800 years, when civilization grows too destructive, I manifest to restore balance. Sometimes through warning. Sometimes through culling. Your ancestors sealed me away because they feared the latter. The ancients?" Carter's fingers flew across her tablet. "You're saying the ancients encountered you on Earth? Not the ancients." Orochi stood, moving to the barrier's edge. Older. The ones who came before even the Alterans walked among stars. Those who understood that every world is alive, every ecosystem a consciousness unto itself. They knew me. Revered me. And when they saw what would come, the Stargate network, the spreading of humanity like spores across the galaxy, some of them begged me to act. To stop it. The entity's form flickered with memory. But I refused. Balance is not stagnation. Growth is natural. So they feared me for mercy rather than judgment, and when the ancients arrived on Earth, they found me weakened from refusing my purpose. They believed me a threat to their grand design and sealed me on P4X 639, a dead world where I could touch no life, feel no ecosystems, render no verdicts. How long? TLC asked quietly. How long were you imprisoned? 10,000 years. 10,000 years of silence while Earth's children walked the stars, while false gods enslaved worlds in divinity's name, while the balance I was born to protect shattered across 1,000 planets. Orochi's voice carried neither anger nor accusation, only profound weariness. And now I wake to find the gold, parasites claiming godhood, have made mockery of the very concept of judgment. O'Neill's expression hardened. Yeah, well, we're working on the gold problem. But that doesn't mean you get to start restoring balance, or whatever euphemism you're using for killing people. I do not wish to kill, Colonel. Orochi met his stare evenly. I wish to teach. To remind. To show humanity that the galaxy is not theirs to consume without consequence. But I cannot do any of that while trapped in this half-state between death and manifestation. The entity moved to the center of the room, and the force field hummed as energy built around Orochi's form. I need a host. Not slavery as the Goa'uld practice, I would merge completely, two consciousnesses becoming one. The host would retain their will, their memories, their self. But they would also carry me, my purpose, my connection to the living systems of worlds. Like the Takare, Daniel said suddenly. Symbiosis, not parasitism. Perhaps. Orochi's form began to destabilize again, wisps of energy bleeding through the barrier like smoke through a screen. But more complete. The Takare remained separate beings in cooperation. I would become part of my host's very soul, as they would become part of mine. We would be neither one nor the other, but something new. Something that could walk between your human need for expansion and Earth's requirement for balance. Carter's tablet chimed. She stared at the readings, then looked up sharply. General Hammond, I need to speak with you immediately. Hammond's voice crackled through. Report, Major. Sir, the energy decay rate is exponential. If Orochi continues losing cohesion at this rate, it will dissipate completely within 6 hours. And sir, she hesitated. When it does, the energy release could be catastrophic. We're talking potentially enough to overload the Stargate, maybe even damage the mountain's containment. In the observation room, O'Neill cursed. Of course. Why would anything ever be simple? So we're looking at either letting this thing possess someone or dealing with an explosion that could take out the SGC. Hammond's tone carried the weight of impossible command decisions. SG-1, continue observation. I'm convening an emergency briefing in 10 minutes. Dr. Jackson, I want everything you know about possession mythology. Major Carter, I want options for containment if this entity does destabilize. TLC, contact the Takare. If this being is telling the truth about symbiosis, they might have insights. Sir, Daniel interrupted, still watching Orochi through the glass. There's something else. The temple glyphs mentioned followers. The Hakkesshu, the 8 heads. If Orochi's awakening was felt across the Stargate network like it claims, and if these followers exist on other worlds. Orochi's head snapped up, eyes widening with realization. Yes. You understand. I am not alone. My consciousness spans beyond this form. When the seal broke, the others felt it. They will come. And they will not ask permission before acting on my behalf. The entity's voice carried both warning and regret. You have 6 hours, General Hammond. 6 hours to decide whether I die and take your mountain with me, whether you allow me to merge with a willing host, or whether my followers arrive first and make that choice for you. They are zealots, warriors who serve the balance across millennia. They will not be as diplomatic as I. The force field flickered as Orochi's energy pulsed. I suggest you choose wisely. Because across the galaxy, 8 gates are beginning to activate. And the Hakkesshu are very, very hungry for judgment to resume. The briefing room felt smaller than usual with the weight of impossible decisions pressing down. Hammond sat at the head of the table, hands steepled, while SG-1 delivered their report with the clinical precision of soldiers facing a nightmare scenario. On the monitor behind them, Orochi's containment cell showed the entity flickering like a candle in a hurricane. Let me make sure I understand, Hammond said, his Texas drawl tight with tension. We have approximately 5 hours before this being either explodes, taking a significant portion of Cheyenne Mountain with it, or before its cult followers start arriving through the Stargate to forcibly complete what it's asking us to do voluntarily. That's the situation, sir. Carter tapped her tablet, projecting energy decay curves that looked like a cliff edge. I've run every containment scenario I can think of. The Naquata generators can't absorb this kind of energy release. The gate can't be used to channel it off-world. Orochi's presence is already destabilizing the network protocols. Our best-case scenario for uncontrolled dissipation is catastrophic damage to levels 19 through 27. Worst case, we breach to the surface. What about the Talkare? Hammond turned to TLC. Any word? Selmac responds that Orochi's description of merger is unlike anything the Talkare practice. TLC's expression was grave. The Talkare symbiote and host remain distinct entities. This would be dissolution of boundaries. Jacob Carter cautions that such complete integration has no precedent in their experience. They cannot predict the outcome. Daniel leaned forward, his archaeologist's excitement barely contained despite the dire circumstances. But that might be exactly the point, General. Every mythology speaks of divine possession differently than parasitism. The oracle at Delphi, shamanic traditions, the concept of being ridden by the Loa in Vodou, these are described as partnerships, not conquests. If Orochi is what it claims, this could be fundamentally different from what the Goa'uld do. Or it could be the most elaborate Goa'uld deception we've ever encountered, O'Neill countered. We take this thing at its word, let it into someone's head, and suddenly we've got a superpowered entity with access to all our gate addresses and security protocols. I do not believe it is Goa'uld. TLC's conviction silenced the room. I have carried a symbiote for over a century. I know the feel of their consciousness, the hunger for domination. This being carries no such desire. It is different. Ancient in a way the Goa'uld pretend to be. Hammond's intercom buzzed. Sir, we have incoming wormhole activity. GDO code is, sir, it's not in our system. The iris is holding but whoever's dialing knows the gate's address. That would be the Hakkesshu, Daniel said quietly. They're trying to reach Orochi. In the isolation room below, Orochi's head lifted, and for the first time, something like hope crossed its features. They come. The 8 who served balance through the ages. Let them through, General. They can provide the truth you seek. Absolutely not. O'Neill was already moving toward the door. We're not opening that iris until we know who's on the other side. Then ask. Orochi stood, form solidifying slightly with evident effort. I will speak through your communication system. But know that if you deny them entry, they will find another way. The Hakkesshu do not accept obstacles gracefully. Hammond made a command decision. Major Carter, get down to the gate room. Analyze that wormhole connection. Dr. Jackson, you're with her. If whoever's dialing through has credentials, I want to know. Colonel, assemble a security detail. If I give the order to open that iris, I want overwhelming force ready. He turned to the monitor. And someone get Dr. Fraser to the observation room. If we're seriously considering allowing a merger, I want medical oversight. The gate room was controlled chaos when Carter and Daniel arrived. The wormhole shimmered behind the iris, stable but showing those same emerald veins Orochi's manifestation had created. Walter Harriman's fingers flew across the dialing computer, trying to trace the incoming connection. "Sir, this doesn't make sense," Walter reported to Hammond via headset. "The origin point is P7J989, but that world has been flagged as uninhabited for 3 years. No power signatures, no Stargate activity, nothing. Not uninhabited." Orochi's voice crackled through the intercom from its cell. "Hidden. The Hakkesshu learned stealth from necessity. The Goa'uld hunt those who refuse to worship false gods. My followers became shadows to survive." A pause. "General, I give you my word, such as you may value it, that the one requesting entry comes in peace." "She wishes only to speak." "She." Daniel's eyes lit up. "General, in the mythology, one of Orochi's primary servants was Shermi, representative of lightning and storms. If this is actually connected to those legends, that might be who's trying to contact us." Hammond's voice carried the weight of calculated risk. "Lower the iris. Security teams, weapons ready but hold fire unless I give explicit orders. Major Carter, if anything comes through that looks remotely hostile, close it immediately." The iris spiraled open. A woman stepped through the event horizon with the grace of a predator. She appeared young, early 20s, with athletic build and red hair that seemed to crackle with static electricity. Her clothing was anachronistic, neither modern nor ancient, but somewhere in between, practical combat gear mixed with ceremonial elements that Daniel recognized from Japanese Shinto traditions. Her eyes swept the gate room, cataloging threats with professional efficiency, before settling on the observation window where she somehow knew Orochi was being held. "I am Shermi of the Hakkesshu," she announced, hands spread to show they were empty. "I felt the awakening across the void between stars. I come to serve the balance, as my bloodline has served for 3,000 years." Her gaze found the security team surrounding her. "Lower your weapons. I am not your enemy unless you make me so." "That's not how this works," O'Neill said, moving down the ramp with his P-90 trained center mass. "You're on our base, in our custody. You want to talk, you do it under guard, in containment, and only after you explain how you know about our Stargate." Shermi tilted her head, and electricity danced across her fingertips. "The gates call to those who listen, Colonel. We of the Hakkesshu have heard their song since the ancients first planted the network. We knew every world touched by Orochi's judgment. And when the seal broke, her expression softened slightly. We knew our deity had returned. General Hammond." Dr. Fraser's voice came through the intercom, urgent but controlled. "Orochi's energy levels just spiked when this woman arrived. It's stabilizing temporarily, but the overall decay is accelerating. We're down to 4 hours, maybe less." Shermi's eyes narrowed. "You imprisoned our god in a cage that kills it? Foolish children. You know nothing of what you've released." Lightning arced between her hands. "Free Orochi now, or I will tear this mountain apart to reach." "Shermi. No." Orochi's voice stopped her mid-threat. "These people saved me from the ancient prison. They brought me to their world, their home. They seek to understand before acting. This is wisdom, not foolishness." The woman's lightning faded, but her stance remained combat-ready. "My deity, you fade. I can feel it. Without a vessel, you will cease. Allow me, I volunteer. Let me be your host as my ancestors offered themselves before me." "You would be consumed," Orochi said gently. I have grown too powerful during my imprisonment, fed by the pain of 10,000 years of ecological collapse across the stars. A human host without preparation would burn out within days. I need someone with unique resonance, someone who bridges worlds, who understands both Earth and the greater cosmos. Daniel's breath caught. You're describing us. SG-1. We're Earth natives who walk among the stars daily. We've seen alien worlds, studied their cultures, witnessed both the beauty and damage of human expansion through the gates. Indeed, Dr. Jackson. Orochi's form pressed against the force field, flickering badly now. I have observed you all. Colonel O'Neill, warrior who questions authority when morality demands. Major Carter, scientist who bridges magic and physics. TLC. Warrior who chose freedom over slavery, proving that change is possible. And you, Daniel, translator of cultures, seeker of understanding over conquest. The entity's voice grew weaker. One of you could host me. One of you could become the bridge between Earth's judgment and humanity's future among stars. One of you could ensure that balance is not enforced through destruction, but taught through example. Shermie's eyes widened. You ask them? Outsiders to our tradition. I ask those best positioned to fulfill my purpose without falling into zealotry. Orochi's gaze swept across SG-1. The Hakkesshu are loyal, but their devotion to balance has sometimes become indistinguishable from fanaticism. I need someone who will question me, who will ensure that judgment serves life rather than doctrine. In the observation room, Hammond watched his flagship team process the impossible request. Janet Fraser stood beside him, medical scanner in hand, her expression a mixture of horror and clinical fascination. Sir, she said quietly, if this merger is anything like what Orochi describes, we're talking about fundamentally altering someone's neurology, possibly their entire cellular structure. I can't predict the medical outcomes. I can't even guarantee survival. I know, Doctor. Hammond's jaw tightened. But if the alternative is either losing Orochi and potentially the mountain, or dealing with more followers arriving with less diplomatic intentions. Below, in the gate room, SG-1 stood in silent communication. Years of missions, of trusting each other with their lives, of making impossible choices together. Finally, Daniel stepped forward. I'll do it. The observation room erupted into argument before Daniel had even finished speaking. Absolutely not. O'Neill's voice cut through the intercom with command finality. Daniel, stand down. We are not volunteering anybody for cosmic possession without exploring every other option first. Jack, we don't have other options. Daniel stood his ground in the gate room, aware of Shermie's calculating gaze, Carter's concerned expression, TLC's stoic evaluation. 4 hours. That's what we have. 4 hours to either let Orochi die and take the mountain with it, or help it survive. And I'm the logical choice. How do you figure that? Carter moved closer, her scientific mind already running scenarios. Daniel, we don't know what this will do to you. The neurological changes alone could be. I've been through worse. Daniel's laugh held no humor. I've died and ascended. I've had an ancient repository downloaded into my brain. I've been host to a Goa'uld. If anyone on this team has experience with consciousness alteration, it's me. And more importantly, he looked toward the observation window, knowing Hammond was listening. I'm the one who's spent his career trying to understand alien cultures instead of just fighting them. If Orochi needs someone who'll question its judgments, who'll advocate for understanding over destruction, that's my entire philosophy. Daniel Jackson speaks wisdom. TLC stepped forward, and for once, his stoicism cracked to show genuine concern. But his history of sacrifice does not obligate him to volunteer again. I have carried a symbiote my entire life. I understand shared consciousness. Perhaps I am better suited. You carried a parasite that you hated, Daniel countered. This is supposed to be different. A partnership. And TLC, you've spent decades fighting false gods. How would you react if Orochi's judgment conflicted with protecting human interests? You'd resist, and that resistance could tear you apart from the inside. Shermi watched the debate with growing frustration. You waste time arguing while our deity fades. The merger is not meant for warriors or scientists. It requires one who understands the sacred, who can hold the balance between earth and stars. Her eyes fixed on Daniel. You, translator of dead languages and forgotten truths. You have walked with gods before. You know the weight of divinity. I've walked with the ascended, Daniel corrected. And I came back because I believed humanity needed advocates on the mortal plane, not distant observers. That's exactly what Orochi claims to want, someone who'll be present, involved, willing to act. Sir. Dr. Fraser's voice carried medical authority. If Dr. Jackson is serious about this, I need him in the infirmary immediately. I want full scans, baselines, everything documented before we even consider proceeding. And I mean everything, neural mapping, genetic sequencing, the works. Hammond's voice came through heavy with the burden of command. Dr. Jackson, are you absolutely certain about this? I can't order you to accept voluntary possession. This has to be your choice, made with full understanding of the risks. Daniel met O'Neill's eyes through the window, seeing the protest there, the fear for a friend who'd already died once in service. I'm certain, General. And Jack, I know you hate this. But think about what we've learned. The Goa'uld are false gods who enslave. The Ori demand blind worship. Even the Ascended refuse to act. If Orochi is what it claims, a force that actually serves balance instead of ego, then we need that perspective. We need someone who'll question whether spreading humanity through the stars is always the right answer. 3.5 hours, sir. Carter's voice was quiet but urgent. The energy decay is accelerating. Hammond made his decision. Dr. Jackson, report to the infirmary. Major Carter, I want you monitoring every aspect of this process with every instrument we have. Colonel O'Neill, TLC, you'll observe from the medical bay. Shermi, if that's your real name. You're confined to the gate room under guard until this is resolved. I will witness the merger, Shermi stated, electricity crackling warningly. I am Hakkesshu. I have the right. You have the right to cooperate or be sedated and locked in a cell. O'Neill's tone brooked no argument. Your call. The woman's jaw tightened, but after a moment, she nodded. I will cooperate. But know this, Colonel, 7 more of my order are crossing the galaxy to reach this world. Some are reasonable as I am. Others, she smiled without warmth. Others believe humanity's expansion is the very imbalance Orochi exists to correct. Pray that this merger succeeds before they arrive. The infirmary had been converted into something between medical bay and arcane laboratory. Dr. Fraser worked with controlled intensity, attaching sensors to Daniel's head, chest, and arms while Carter set up monitoring equipment that hummed with Naquata-powered precision. Orochi had been transported, with extreme caution, to an adjacent room, still contained but visible through reinforced glass. Neural activity normal, Fraser reported, studying her screens. Blood pressure elevated, but that's expected given the circumstances. Daniel, any headaches, dizziness, unusual sensations? Just the usual prepossession jitters. Daniel's attempt at humor fell flat. Through the glass, he could see Orochi's form barely maintaining cohesion, wisps of energy bleeding away like smoke. How long does it have? 2 hours, maybe less. Carter checked her tablet, then looked up at him with uncharacteristic vulnerability. Daniel, you don't have to do this. We could evacuate the mountain, let Orochi dissipate in a controlled manner. And lose potentially the only being in the universe that might actually care about environmental balance across the galaxy. Sam, think about what we've done. How many planets have we visited and altered just by being there? How many times have we introduced technology, weapons, ideas that changed entire civilizations? Maybe we need someone asking whether we should do something, not just whether we can. O'Neill leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You sound like you've been thinking about this for a while. I have. Daniel met his friend's eyes. Ever since Abydos. Ever since I realized that opening that first gate meant we'd be changing the galaxy forever. The Goa'uld are evil, yes. But what about after them? What happens when Earth becomes the dominant power? Do we become benevolent explorers, or do we repeat the ancients' mistakes, spread too far, consume too much, forget that every world we touch has its own balance? That's a hell of a philosophical burden to carry, Daniel. O'Neill's voice softened slightly. You sure you want to add a nature deity's perspective on top of your own guilt? Maybe I need it. Daniel stood, disconnecting from the preliminary sensors. Maybe we all need it. Someone who'll say, stop, consider, think about the consequences. Not to prevent action, but to ensure it's the right action. Fraser exchanged glances with Hammond, who'd entered the room silently. General, Dr. Jackson's vitals are stable. If we're going to proceed, I've documented everything I can. But I have to state for the record that I have no idea what this will do to him. Noted, Doctor. Hammond turned to Orochi's containment. Can this being hear me? I hear, General. Orochi's voice was faint, barely carrying through the glass. And I thank you for considering this choice. Daniel Jackson, approach. Let me explain what you will experience. Daniel moved to the barrier separating them. Up close, Orochi's form was breathtaking, shifting between human and something vaster, glimpses of forests and oceans and storm systems all compressed into a single shape. Its eyes, when they focused on him, held depths that made ancient repositories seem shallow. The merger will be complete, Orochi explained. You will retain your memories, your personality, your will. But you will also gain my perspective, the ability to sense living systems, to feel the health of ecosystems, to know when balance is threatened. You will hear Earth's voice as I do, and the voices of every world touched by life. Will I still be me? You will be more than you. Daniel Jackson, translator and seeker, merged with Orochi, judge and guardian. Your compassion will temper my judgment. My perspective will expand your understanding. Together, we will become something neither of us could be alone, a bridge between humanity's future and nature's necessity. The entity's form flickered dangerously. But know this, you will feel the pain of worlds damaged by expansion. You will sense the ecosystem struggling under the weight of civilization. You will know, intimately, the cost of every gate activation, every colony established, every resource extracted. Can you bear that knowledge and still advocate for humanity's place among the stars? Daniel thought of Shari, dead because the Goa'uld enslaved humans. He thought of Abydos, destroyed because Earth's enemies saw it as leverage. He thought of countless worlds saved by SG teams, and countless others altered irreversibly by their presence. I can bear it. And more than that, I can use it. To help us do better. To ensure that when we walk among the stars, we do it with wisdom, not just weapons. Then we have understanding. Orochi pressed against the barrier. Dar. Fraser, lower the containment. The merger must be consensual in every aspect. Daniel must accept me of his own will, in full knowledge of what we become. Fraser's hand hovered over the control. General. Hammond looked at his team, at Carter's scientific concern, at TLCS warriors' acceptance of necessary sacrifice, at O'Neill's barely controlled fear for a friend. Then at Daniel, standing ready to fundamentally change himself for a greater purpose. Lower it. The force field died. Orochi stepped forward, and its form began to dissolve, not dying now, but transforming into pure energy that swirled around Daniel like a living storm. Green and gold and colors without names filled the room, and Daniel felt the first touch of consciousness that was utterly alien yet strangely familiar. "Are you ready, Daniel Jackson?" The voice spoke directly into his mind, bypassing language entirely. It carried the weight of ages, the song of forests, the rage of storms, the patience of stone. Daniel closed his eyes and opened his soul. "I'm ready. Let's find the balance together." The energy surged inward, and Daniel Jackson began to change. The briefing room had become a war council. SG-1 sat alongside 5 Hakkesshu warriors who radiated barely controlled power, while on the monitor, Jacob Carter, Selmac's measured voice occasionally overlapping his own, assessed the situation with Takare strategic precision. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Jacob said, his eyes momentarily glowing as Selmac contributed analysis. "One of your ancient nature warriors has gone rogue and is targeting Baal, one of the most paranoid and well-defended system lords in the galaxy. And you want our help stopping him before this triggers a full-scale response against Earth?" "That's the situation," Daniel confirmed, his voice carrying both his own urgency and Orochi's ancient patience. The merger had settled into something more controlled now, less overwhelming display and more integrated presence. He sat like Daniel Jackson but moved with an awareness that suggested he felt every life form in the mountain, every ecosystem beyond its walls. Chris believes the gold represent absolute imbalance, false gods enslaving worlds. He's not entirely wrong, but if he attacks Baal directly, the system lords will unite against what they perceive as a new threat to their dominance. "And that threat would be you," O'Neill stated flatly. "They'll see this merged god thing as competition." "Indeed," TLC added, his warrior's instinct recognizing the tactical nightmare. "The system lords have historically allied against common enemies despite their constant infighting. A being claiming genuine divine authority, commanding warriors with powers beyond gold technology, would represent exactly such a threat." Shermie leaned forward, electricity crackling along her arms. "Then let them come. The Hakkesshu have hidden from false gods for millennia. If they wish to test themselves against Orochi's true judgment, we will show them the difference between parasitic pretenders and actual divine will." "No," Daniel's command stopped her short. "That's exactly the zealotry that drove Chris to act alone. We're not here to wage war on the gold. Earth's already doing that through military and diplomatic channels. We're here to prove that balance can be achieved through wisdom, not destruction." Gonitz, the wind caller whose hair moved in constant invisible breeze, spoke with barely restrained skepticism. "And how do you propose we achieve this wisdom, Lord Orochi?" "Chris has already acted. The system lords will respond regardless of our intentions. Perhaps the vessel's human optimism blinds you to reality. War is inevitable." Carter had been working her tablet throughout the discussion, analyzing data streams. "Not necessarily. We have one advantage: Baal doesn't know about Orochi yet. If we can reach Chris before he completes his attack, if we can demonstrate that we're actively preventing aggression against the gold, we might be able to frame this as an internal matter rather than an external threat." Selmac believes this approach has merit. Jacob's voice shifted to the symbiote's inflection. "The Takare have operatives near Baal's current location. We can provide intelligence on his movements and defenses. But understand, if Chris has already engaged, Baal will have detected the unusual energy signatures. His paranoia is legendary. He will investigate, and he will not rest until he understands what threatened him." Daniel stood, moving to the star map display that showed gate addresses throughout the galaxy. His merged awareness reached out, feeling for Chris's distinctive presence through the network. There. P3X888, Soker's former base, now one of Baal's secondary facilities. Chris chose it deliberately. Isolated, heavily defended, but far enough from Baal's primary forces that he could strike without immediately triggering full system lord response. "Smart," O'Neill admitted grudgingly. "Hit a secondary target to test defenses, gather intelligence. It's what I'd do. But it also means he's probing, not committing to full assault yet. Daniel's eyes glowed briefly with emerald light as Orochi's consciousness surged forward. We have a window. Narrow, but present. If we gate there now, if we can stop Chris before he kills anyone, we maintain plausible deniability. Hammond, who'd been listening silently, finally spoke. Dr. Jackson, and I'm still calling you that because I refuse to address one of my people as Lord Orochi, you're proposing taking SG-1 and these Hakkesshu warriors into one of Baal's facilities to stop a cosmic zealot from attacking a system lord we'd love to see dead anyway. Do I have that right? Yes, sir. And you believe this serves Earth's interests how, exactly? Daniel met his commander's eyes. Because if the system lords unite against a perceived divine threat, Earth becomes ground zero for that conflict. We're the ones who released Orochi. We're the ones harboring the Hakkesshu. When Baal investigates and discovers this power originated from the Tauri, he won't see us as neutral parties, he'll see us as orchestrating a new weapon against them. Which we kind of are, O'Neill pointed out. You are technically a weapon, Daniel. A really weird, nature-themed, philosophically complicated weapon, but still. I'm a perspective, Daniel corrected. A consciousness that can help humanity navigate the galaxy more responsibly. But the system lords won't see it that way. They'll see competition, threat, danger to their false divinity. And they'll respond accordingly. TLC stood, decision made. Then we must prevent Chris from providing them justification. I will join Daniel Jackson on this mission. My knowledge of gold facilities and tactics will prove useful. As will mine, Shermy added. Chris is my brother in service. I know his patterns, his preferred methods of attack. And I can match his lightning if he refuses to stand down. Mature, the Voidwalker whose edges seem to blur reality, smiled darkly. I will join as well. Chris always was too hasty. Someone must remind him that balance requires patience. Hammond looked to Carter. Major, your assessment. Tactically sound, sir. We need to contain this before it escalates. And if we're going into a gold facility, we need overwhelming force and unusual capabilities. The Hakkesshu provide both. She glanced at Daniel. Plus, if anyone can talk Chris down, it's Orochi's direct authority. Colonel O'Neill. Jack studied Daniel, his friend who'd died and ascended and returned, who'd survived repository downloads and gold possession, who'd now merged with a cosmic entity to prevent disaster. I hate every part of this plan. But I hate the alternative more. We go, we extract Chris, we prevent galactic war. Typical Tuesday for SG-1. Permission to speak freely, General? Daniel asked. Granted. This isn't just about preventing war. It's about proving something fundamental, that humanity can police itself, can recognize when its own actions threaten balance, can choose restraint over expansion. If we stop Chris from attacking the Goa'uld, we demonstrate that Orochi's judgment serves wisdom, not vengeance. That matters for Earth's future among the stars. Hammond nodded slowly. Permission granted for the mission. SG-1 plus 3 Hakkesshu, Shermy, Mature, and Gonitz. The rest of you remain here as liaison and reserve force. Jacob, we'll need those Takare intel packages immediately. Already transmitting, Jacob confirmed. And Dr. Jackson, Daniel, be careful. Baal may be paranoid, but he's also brilliant. If he captures you, if he learns what you've become, he'll find a way to exploit it. The Goa'uld always do. The gate room was controlled chaos as SG-1 prepared for deployment. Daniel stood at the center, feeling the mountain's ecosystem around him with uncomfortable clarity, the recycled air carrying microbes, the concrete pressing down on stone that remembered being ocean floor, the humans moving like cells in a larger organism. Orochi's awareness was overwhelming at times, but also clarifying. He understood now why balance mattered, because everything connected, and disrupting one connection rippled through all others. "You ready for this?" Carter asked, checking her scanner one final time. "Because you're reading off the charts again. If Ball has sensors even half as sophisticated as ours, you're going to light up like a Christmas tree." "I can dampen the energy signature," Daniel said, and demonstrated. Pulling Orochi's power inward until the external radiation diminished to barely detectable levels. "It's like holding your breath. Uncomfortable, but manageable for short periods." Shermie approached, bowing slightly with respect that made Daniel uncomfortable. "Lord Orochi, a question before we depart. When we confront Chris, if he refuses to stand down, what are your orders? The Hakkesshu have never fought each other before. We are all bound to serve the balance." "Then serve it by preserving his life while stopping his attack," Daniel answered firmly. "Chris isn't evil, he's traumatized. He spent millennia watching the galaxy being destroyed while his deity slept imprisoned. That pain drives him toward solutions that feel like justice but are actually revenge. We stop him, we contain him, but we don't kill him. Even if he forces the issue." Mature's question carried genuine curiosity. "Even if restraint means allowing him to damage Baal's forces, to trigger the very response we seek to prevent?" Daniel felt Orochi's ancient wisdom flowing through the answer. "Especially then. Because the moment we choose expediency over principle, we become exactly what Chris accuses us of being, compromised judgment. We prove balance through consistency, not convenience." O'Neill loaded his P90 with practiced efficiency. "Just so we're clear. I'm all for high-minded principles, but if this Chris kid starts throwing around cosmic fire and threatens my team, I'm shooting him. Stun if possible, lethal if necessary. We clear on that?" "Crystal clear, Jack. And I wouldn't expect anything different. Protect the team. That's always been our first principle." Daniel moved to the gate controls where Walter was entering the address for P3X888. "But let me lead with dialogue. Give me the chance to reach him before we resort to force." "You get 30 seconds, O'Neill stated. "Then we do this the military way." TLC hefted his staff weapon, his expression grave. "Daniel Jackson, you have faced many challenges since joining SG-1. You have died in service to others. You have sacrificed your own ascension to return and help. Now you carry the burden of divine judgment merged with human compassion. Do not let that burden break you." "I won't, TLC. Because I'm not carrying it alone." Daniel gestured to the team around him, warriors and scientists, humans and cosmic guardians, all united in preventing catastrophe. This is what Orochi needed to understand. Balance isn't achieved through solitary judgment. It's achieved through cooperation, through diverse perspectives working toward shared goals. Chris fights alone. We fight together. That's the difference. The seventh chevron locked. The event horizon exploded outward, then settled into its shimmering surface. Gonit stepped forward, wind whipping around him despite the enclosed space. "Lord Orochi, one more question. When we confront the Goa'uld, if they see you, if they recognize divine power that exceeds their false claims, what message do you wish to send? What judgment do parasites who enslaved galaxies deserve?" Daniel looked at the Stargate, at the connection to a world where false gods maintained power through fear and technology. He felt Orochi's rage at their presumption, their mockery of actual divinity. But he also felt his own understanding that the Jaffa were enslaved, that the hosts were innocent, that the system perpetuated itself through ignorance and oppression rather than pure evil. "The message is simple," he said finally. "The Goa'uld are not gods. They never were. And when humanity proves capable of stopping both external threats and internal extremism, when we show that we can maintain balance without cosmic intervention, their entire foundation of false divinity crumbles. That's the judgment they deserve, not death, but irrelevance." He stepped toward the gate. SG-1, Hakkesshu, let's move out. We have a zealot to stop and a galaxy to save from unnecessary war. One by one, they walked through the event horizon. Soldiers and scientists, humans and cosmic warriors, united in purpose if not entirely in understanding. And as Daniel felt the Stargate's dematerialization wash over his merged form, he sent a silent prayer to whatever forces governed the universe. Let this work. Let Chris listen. Let us prove that balance serves life, not death. The wormhole carried them across the galaxy, toward confrontation, toward choices that would determine whether Orochi's return meant wisdom or catastrophe. And on P3X888, in the depths of what was once Soker's hell and was now Baal's fortress, Chris stood before a battalion of Jaffa warriors, purple flame dancing across his hands, crimson eyes blazing with righteous fury. The judgment had already begun. P3X888 was exactly as horrific as Daniel remembered from their previous mission years ago. Soker had designed it as literal hell, volcanic caverns, rivers of lava, architecture built to terrify and torment. That Baal had claimed it after Soker's death said everything about the System Lord's theatrical cruelty. The planet existed to remind enemies what awaited those who opposed him. SG-1 materialized in a service corridor far from the main gate, using a secondary ring transport system that the Takare had provided coordinates for. The heat hit immediately, oppressive, sulfurous, barely tolerable even with their environmental gear. But for Daniel, merged with Orochi, the planet's ecosystem screamed in his awareness. This world had been alive once, verdant and balanced. The gold had turned it into a weapon, poisoning its biosphere until only extremophile bacteria survived in the lava flows. I feel it, he whispered, and Orochi's rage bled through his control. They murdered a world to create a symbol. They killed an entire planetary ecosystem for theater. Daniel. Carter's hand on his arm pulled him back from the abyss of merged fury. Stay focused. We need you here, now, not lost in ecological grief. He took a breath, pushed down the overwhelming sorrow-anger of a nature deity witnessing deliberate planetary death. Right. Chris. Where is he? Shermie closed her eyes, electricity crackling as she reached out through whatever connection the Hakkesshu shared. Central chamber. He's already engaged Baal's forces. I sense significant casualties. Jaffa warriors. Staff weapon fire. And Chris's flames burning hot enough to melt bulkheads. Casualties? TLC's expression darkened. The Jaffa are enslaved warriors. Killing them does not serve balance, it perpetuates the cycle of violence. Try telling Chris that. Mature's form flickered at the edges, partially phasing as she prepared for combat. He sees only the slavery system, not the individuals trapped within it. To him, Jaffa who serve false gods are complicit in the imbalance. Then we need to get there before he commits acts he can't take back. O'Neill checked his P-90's ammo count. TLC, you're on point. You know gold facility layouts better than anyone. Carter, watch our 6 and monitor for reinforcements. Daniel, Hakkesshu, you're our heavy hitters if this goes sideways. Let's move. They advanced through corridors designed to intimidate, walls carved with images of suffering, lighting that created shadows suggesting lurking horrors, the distant screams of prisoners that might be recordings or might be real. Daniel's merged senses felt the wrongness of it all, the deliberate corruption of space that should nurture life into an environment that celebrated death. The sound of combat grew louder, energy weapons discharging, voices shouting in goa'uld, and underneath it all, a crackling roar like a wildfire consuming a forest. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the central chamber, and the scene below froze them in tactical assessment. Chris stood at the chamber's center, surrounded by the bodies of at least 24 Jaffa warriors. He wasn't just fighting, he was dancing through combat with terrifying grace. Purple flames spiraled around him in geometric patterns, incinerating staff weapon blasts before they reached him. When Jaffa charged with Zatnik telephones, he moved with speed that left afterimages, flames erupting from his hands to send warriors flying. But he was holding back. Daniel's merged awareness recognized it immediately. Chris could have killed every Jaffa in seconds, could have unleashed power that would crack the facility's foundation. Instead, he disabled them, burned them enough to remove them from combat but not enough to kill outright. "He's showing restraint," Daniel said with surprise. "He's angry, not murderous." For now. Gonitz watched with wind beginning to swirl around his own form. But restraint erodes in combat. The longer this continues, the more likely he is to escalate. A voice boomed through the chamber, amplified, carrying the arrogant resonance of a Goa'uld speaking through a human host. "Enough. Identify yourself, intruder. No human possesses such power without Goa'uld enhancement or ancient technology. What are you?" The chamber's far wall shimmered, revealing a viewing platform where a figure stood in ornate armor. Not Baal himself, Daniel's knowledge recognized this as one of Baal's underlords, a minor system lord managing this facility. But the recognition worked both ways. The Goa'uld's eyes widened. Impossible. That energy signature, it predates the Goa'uld Empire. It predates the ancients themselves. What manner of being are you? Chris's crimson eyes blazed brighter. I am Hakkesshu. Servant of true judgment, warrior of actual balance. And you, parasite pretending to divinity, represent everything Orochi exists to correct. You enslave worlds, corrupt ecosystems, claim godhood through technology rather than genuine transcendence. Your existence is an abomination. Purple flames erupted around him, building toward devastating release. I pronounce judgment, false god. You and all your kind must be purged so that balance can be restored to the galaxy. Chris, stop. Daniel's voice cracked across the chamber like thunder, amplified by Orochi's power. Every head turned, Jaffa scrambling for cover, the Goa'uld underlord's expression shifting to shock, and Chris freezing mid-attack as he recognized the merged presence. Lord Orochi. Chris's flames dimmed slightly. You came. Finally, you will witness their crimes, pronounce true judgment, and I pronounce nothing except that you're making a terrible mistake. Daniel vaulted the balcony railing, dropping 20 feet to land with Orochi-enhanced grace that barely jarred his knees. The team followed more carefully, rappelling down while the Hakkesshu simply descended through their various powers, Shermie riding lightning, Mature phasing through space, Gonitz floating on wind currents. They formed a line between Chris and the Goa'uld underlord's platform, weapons ready but not yet firing. Chris stared at Daniel with a mixture of reverence and confusion. Why do you defend the false god? You feel what I feel. This facility is built on planetary death, maintained through slavery, operated by parasites who mock genuine divinity. They deserve destruction. Deserve, maybe. Daniel moved forward slowly, hands visible and unthreatening. But deserve and necessity aren't the same thing. You're attacking Baal's forces because you want to punish the Goa'uld for their crimes. I understand that desire. Orochi's consciousness carries 10,000 years of rage at false gods. But punishment isn't balance, Chris. It's revenge. They enslaved galaxies. Yes. And humanity has spent years fighting to free those enslaved, to overthrow the system lords through strategic action and alliance building. The Takare work from within. The Free Jaffa rebellion grows stronger daily. Earth's Stargate command has defeated system lords and liberated worlds. The balance is already shifting through collective effort, not individual judgment. Chris's flames flared again. Too slow. While humans debate and plan, ecosystems die. Species go extinct. The imbalance grows. Swift judgment is necessary. Swift judgment is easy, Daniel interrupted. It's also often wrong. You're standing in a room full of Jaffa you didn't kill despite having the power to do so. Why? Because some part of you recognizes that they're victims too, enslaved by symbiotes they need to survive, raised from birth to worship false gods. They don't deserve death for the crime of being born into a system they didn't create. He gestured to the gold underlord's platform. And yes, that parasite up there is different. It chose to enslave, to dominate, to perpetuate the system. But killing one underlord doesn't destroy the gold empire. It just alerts them to a new threat and gives them justification to unite against it. TLC stepped forward, staff weapon lowered. I speak as one who served false gods for a century, Chris of the Hakkesshu. I killed for them. I enforced their will. I was complicit in slavery and murder. By your judgment, I deserve death. Yet Daniel Jackson and his companions offered me the chance to choose freedom, to fight against the system I once served. That choice led to the Free Jaffa Rebellion, to thousands of warriors abandoning false gods. Would you have denied that possibility by pronouncing swift judgment upon me? Chris faltered, flames dimming further. You chose differently. You rebelled. Because someone gave me the opportunity to do so. TLC's voice carried the weight of painful memory. Because SG-1 showed me that false gods could be opposed, that symbiotes were not divine, that I could choose my own path. Swift judgment would have killed me before that choice was possible. The gold underlord, sensing opportunity in the confusion, shouted through his enhanced voice. You speak of balance and judgment, but you are merely insurgents with unusual powers. Jaffa, to me. Eliminate these. Mature didn't wait for orders. She phased partially out of reality, moved through space in a way that defied physics, and reappeared on the gold's platform. Her hand touched the underlord's forehead, and the parasite's eyes widened in terror. I am Voidwalker, she said softly. I exist between realities. Would you like to experience that state? To feel what it means to be neither fully present nor completely absent. To understand how insignificant your false divinity is compared to the spaces between existence itself. The gold tried to activate a ribbon device, but Mature's other hand caught his wrist. Or would you prefer to listen quietly while we resolve this internal matter? Because unlike my young colleague down there, I have no qualms about showing parasites the void they claim to rule. Stand down, Mature. Daniel's voice carried command. We're not here to torture, even false gods who deserve it. She released the gold but remained on the platform, a clear threat. Below, the Jaffa warriors were caught between training to protect their god and survival instinct that recognized overwhelming force when they saw it. O'Neill made the tactical decision. Jaffa. Your god is currently at the mercy of someone who could erase him from existence. Your staff weapons can't hurt us, you've already seen Chris shrug off your best shots. You want to live through this, you back away slowly, you don't activate any alarms, and you let us handle our family business. Clear. The Jaffa exchanged glances. Finally, their leader, a first prime identifiable by the gold emblem on his forehead, made a choice. Fall back. Defensive positions only. Do not engage unless directly attacked. It was capitulation born of pragmatism, and TLC recognized a kindred spirit, a warrior forced to serve a false god but smart enough to recognize when resistance meant pointless death. Daniel turned back to Chris. This is what balance looks like in practice. Not destroying everyone who opposes us, but creating situations where even enemies recognize cooperation serves survival better than conflict. You attacked this facility to punish the gold. Instead, you've demonstrated that the Hakkesshu possess overwhelming power but choose restraint. That message is more powerful than any body count. Chris's flames extinguished completely. He looked around at the Jaffa he'd disabled but not killed, at the gold who lived only because Mature permitted it, at Daniel standing before him radiating the merged authority he'd served across millennia. I am compromised, he said quietly. You speak with Lord Orochi's voice, but also the vessel's human optimism. How do I know which perspective guides your judgment? Because both perspectives agree. Daniel stepped close enough that Chris could feel the merged energy, could sense both consciousnesses working in harmony. Orochi's divine wisdom says that balance requires ecosystems to adapt and evolve, not remain static. My human experience says that people deserve the chance to choose change before judgment forces it upon them. Those aren't conflicting views, they're complementary truths. He held out his hand. Come back with us. Join the SGC not as a warrior waiting to pronounce doom, but as an advisor helping humanity expand responsibly. Use your millennia of experience to guide us toward better choices. Be the balance, Chris, don't just enforce it. For a long moment, Chris stared at the offered hand. Around them, the facility held its breath, Jaffa watching, the gold trembling under Mature's presence, SG-1 ready to fight if this went wrong. Finally, Chris's crimson eyes dimmed to more human brown. He reached out and clasped Daniel's hand. I will try, Lord Orochi. But if humanity proves itself incapable of learning, if the imbalance grows despite our guidance, his grip tightened. Promise me you won't let compassion prevent necessary judgment. Promise that if the time comes, you will act even if it means opposing the vessel's human attachments. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness surge forward, felt the ancient deity's voice blend completely with his own for a moment of absolute truth. I promise that if humanity becomes the threat you fear, judgment will come. But I also promise to give them every opportunity to prove they're better than their worst impulses. That's what balance means. Not destroying the unbalanced, but teaching them to find equilibrium themselves. Chris nodded slowly and released his hand. From the platform above, the gold underlord found his voice again, trying to reassert authority even as Mature's fingers hovered near his temple. You think you can simply leave? Baal will hear of this intrusion. The system lords will learn of your existence. And when they do, they will unite against this threat as they have against all others who challenge our divine right to rule. Daniel looked up at the parasite with an expression mixing pity and steel. Tell Baal. Tell all the system lords. Tell them that something ancient has awakened, something that remembers when they were nothing but parasitic worms pretending to godhood. And tell them this, we don't seek their destruction. We seek their irrelevance. When humanity learns to walk among the stars with wisdom instead of conquest, when the free Jaffa prove that worship is not necessary for survival, when the Takare demonstrate that symbiosis can be partnership rather than slavery, the false gods will simply fade away, forgotten footnotes in galactic history. He turned away. Mature, release him. He's not worth our time. As they moved toward the exit, coordinating with Walter back at the SGC for extraction, Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness reflecting on what had just occurred. They'd stopped Chris from murder, demonstrated restraint to a gold facility, and claimed the moral high ground. But in doing so, they'd also announced their existence to the system lords. The real test of balance was about to begin. The return to the SGC should have felt like a victory. They'd prevented Chris from triggering a galactic incident, demonstrated the Hakkeshu's willingness to accept Orochi's merged judgment, and escaped Baal's facility without significant casualties. But as SG-1 and their unusual allies stepped through the Stargate into the gate room, Daniel felt Orochi's awareness screaming warnings through their shared consciousness. Something had changed while they were gone. Sir, welcome back. Walter's voice carried unusual tension. General Hammond requests SG-1 and the Hakkesshu report to the briefing room immediately. We've had developments. O'Neill caught the tone instantly. What kind of developments, Walter? The kind that involve multiple system lords suddenly very interested in Earth, sir. The briefing room was crowded. Hammond sat grim-faced at the head of the table, with Jacob Carter's image on the monitor looking equally troubled. But what made Daniel's merged awareness recoil was the additional presence. Another screen showing a gold transmission, currently paused on an image of Baal's face frozen mid-speech. Report, Hammond ordered as SG-1 entered. Mission successful, Sir, O'Neill began. We extracted Chris before he killed anyone important, demonstrated that we're willing to police our own cosmic warriors, and only slightly terrified a gold underlord in the process. That slight terror has had significant consequences, Colonel. Hammond gestured to the frozen image. 10 minutes after you gated back, we received this transmission. It was broadcast not just to Earth, but to every system lord, every Takare cell, and every major power in the galaxy. Ball wanted an audience. He pressed play. Bale's face filled the screen, and even through the transmission, his intelligence and cunning were evident. Unlike many Goa'uld who relied on theatrics and false divinity, Ball presented himself as a strategist speaking to equals, which made him far more dangerous. To all who concern themselves with galactic stability, Ball began, his voice carrying none of the usual Goa'uld arrogance, I bring warning of a new threat. The Tauri, Earth, has released an entity claiming primordial divine authority. This being commands warriors with powers beyond conventional understanding, energy signatures that predate even ancient technology, and most concerning, the ability to pass judgment upon entire civilizations. The image shifted to recordings from the facility, Chris fighting Jaffa, Mature phasing to the platform, and most damning, Daniel himself speaking with that merged voice that carried harmonic resonance of both human and deity. The Tauri have consistently claimed to be explorers, defenders against Goa'uld oppression. Yet now they harbor a force that pronounces judgment upon false gods, their words, not mine. They speak of balance and wisdom while demonstrating power that could devastate worlds. They preach restraint while their warriors assault Goa'uld facilities. Ball leaned forward, and his expression became deadly serious. I propose a temporary alliance among all system lords. Not to conquer Earth. That prize can be disputed later. But to neutralize this primordial threat before it decides that all of us, Goa'uld and human alike, represent imbalance requiring correction. The enemy of my enemy, as the Tauri themselves say, is my ally. The transmission ended. Silence filled the briefing room until Jacob's voice cut through. It gets worse. We've intercepted communications between at least 4 system lords expressing interest in Bale's proposal. You, surprisingly, is advocating for investigation before action. But Callie, Morrigan, and Olakan are all mobilizing fleets. They're not coordinating a full alliance yet, but the conversation has started. Chris, standing near the back with the other Hakkesshu, spoke with genuine remorse. This is my fault. I acted rashly, allowed anger to override strategy. Lord Orochi, I have. You acted according to your nature and experience, Daniel interrupted, feeling Orochi's understanding flow through him. The fault isn't in your attack. It's in my assumption that we could demonstrate restraint without consequences. Ball is brilliant. He recognized exactly what we are and exactly how to frame our existence as a threat that would unite his enemies against us. Carter was already working projections on her tablet. Sir, if even 3 system lords commit to a coordinated assault on Earth, our defenses won't hold. The Asgard are dealing with their own replicator crisis and can't help. The Takare can provide intelligence but not military support. We'd be facing Hatak motherships, Hakkesshu bombers, possibly hundreds of death gliders, all targeting Cheyenne Mountain. Then we don't let it get that far. O'Neill stood, that tactical mind already working scenarios. We go on the offensive. Hit their fleet staging areas, disrupt their coordination, make it too costly to maintain the alliance. That would require extensive military action across multiple worlds, Hammond said. Action that would strain our resources and likely cause significant casualties among Jaffa who are increasingly questioning their servitude. And it would prove Bale's point, that we're aggressive, unpredictable, dangerous. TLC's expression grew troubled. General Hammond speaks truth. Many Jaffa watch the Free Jaffa rebellion with interest. They doubt the gods but lack the courage to openly rebel. If Earth attacks Goa'uld forces preemptively, those Jaffa will see only aggression, not defense. We would lose potential allies. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness analyzing the situation with ancient strategic wisdom. The deity had witnessed this pattern before, power concentrated in one being or faction, others uniting against it regardless of actual threat level, conflict escalating until balance was achieved through destruction rather than wisdom. There's another option, he said slowly. One that's risky but addresses the core issue. Baal framed me, us, as a primordial threat hiding behind Earth. What if we prove we're not hiding? What if Orochi accepts his challenge and demonstrates that balance doesn't require Earth's protection or system lord destruction? O'Neill's expression hardened. You want to meet with the system lords? Daniel, they'll either try to kill you, capture you for study, or find some way to weaponize you against Earth. This is suicide. Not if we do it correctly. Daniel moved to the star map, his merged awareness already identifying the perfect location. There's a neutral world, P2X 338, the Hazara system. It's considered sacred ground by multiple cultures, a place where even gold honor temporary truce for negotiations. If we call a summit there, if we openly invite the system lords to witness what Orochi actually represents, we take away Baal's narrative. Shermi's electricity crackled with agitation. Lord Orochi, you would willingly place yourself before false gods. Allow them to judge you when you are meant to judge them? Exactly. Daniel felt the rightness of it settle into place, both his human diplomatic instincts and Orochi's divine patience agreeing. Balance isn't about domination. It's about dialogue. If I claim to represent wisdom over destruction, I have to demonstrate that by accepting scrutiny, by explaining our purpose, by proving that we're not the threat Baal portrays. Jacob's image showed Selmak's concern. Daniel, the Takare appreciate the diplomatic approach, but you're asking the system lords to believe that a being with primordial power doesn't want to replace them. That's not how gold psychology works. They assume everyone seeks domination because they seek domination. Then we use their psychology against them. Carter's tactical mind had caught Daniel's thread. Baal united them by presenting a common threat. But system lords are fundamentally competitive. If we can demonstrate that Orochi's judgment applies to all imbalances, including human expansion, Earth's growing power, our mistakes as well as gold crimes, we reframe the narrative. We're not a tool of Earth. We're an independent force that happens to currently ally with humanity because humanity is trying to learn. Mature, the Void Walker who'd remained silent until now, smiled with dark amusement. You propose to convince false gods that you're a true god who doesn't want their worship or their domains. An interesting philosophical position. I wonder if their limited imaginations can even comprehend it. Gonit's wind swirled thoughtfully. But if they can, if we succeed in this diplomatic mission, we establish Orochi as a separate entity from Earth's political interests. That protects the Tauri from being targeted for harboring us. It also establishes precedent for the Hakkesshu to operate independently, serving balance rather than any single faction. It's extremely dangerous, Hammond stated flatly. Dr. Jackson, you're proposing to walk into a room with beings who've enslaved galaxies, who've committed genocide for entertainment, who see mercy as weakness. And you want to convince them that you pose no threat while simultaneously embodying enough power to theoretically destroy them all. Daniel met his commander's eyes. Yes, sir. Because the alternative is war that will kill thousands of Jaffa, damage Earth standing among potential allies, and ultimately fail to address the fundamental issue, that beings with power must prove they deserve it through restraint, not demonstrate it through force. O'Neill ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I hate this plan. But I hate all our other options more, which seems to be a recurring theme today. He looked at Hammond. Sir, if Daniel's going to do this insane diplomatic stunt, SG-1 goes with him. And we bring enough Hakkesshu to make it clear that talking is option 1, but overwhelming force is option 2. The Takare can facilitate the summit, Jacob offered. We have contacts among the minor system lords who might be persuaded to attend, especially if we present it as an opportunity to evaluate Baal's claims independently. You would likely attend. He's been System Lord long enough to be curious rather than immediately hostile to unusual situations. Hammond stood, decision made despite obvious reservations. Very well. Major Carter, coordinate with the TOC-RA to arrange this summit. Colonel O'Neill, prepare SG-1 and select Hakkesshu for maximum security and minimal provocation, if that's possible with cosmic warriors. Dar. Jackson, you have 24 hours to prepare whatever diplomatic approach you're going to use to convince the galaxy's worst parasites that you're not planning to judge them into extinction. I won't need 24 hours, sir. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness settling into calm certainty. I just need to tell them the truth. That balance isn't about destroying the unbalanced, it's about teaching them that sustainability serves their interests better than exploitation. Even Gould understands self-interest. As the briefing broke up, teams scrambling to prepare for a summit that could prevent or trigger galactic war, Chris approached Daniel with unusual humility. Lord Orochi, I questioned your merger's wisdom. I believe the human vessel compromised your judgment. But what you propose? Facing false gods with truth rather than power, this is balance I had not considered. Forgive my doubt. Nothing to forgive, Chris. Daniel placed a hand on the younger warrior's shoulder, feeling the echo of millennia of service and pain. You've watched the galaxy burn while Orochi slept. Your doubt is earned. But watch what happens at this summit. Watch how humanity navigates impossible situations not through superior force, but through words, alliances, and the willingness to be vulnerable in service of greater peace. This is what the vessel brings to divine judgment, hope that change is possible even in the darkest circumstances. Chris nodded slowly. Then I will witness. And perhaps learn what balance looks like when wisdom guides it rather than wrath. 23 hours later, coordinates were set. The TOC-RA had worked diplomatic miracles, convincing 5 system lords to attend the neutral summit, Baal, Yu, Kali, Olakan, and surprisingly, Camulus. Minor lords and Jaffa first primes would observe. The TOC-RA themselves would maintain security. And in the middle of it all, Daniel Jackson, archaeologist, diplomat, and now merged embodiment of primordial judgment, would stand before the galaxy's most dangerous parasites and explain why balance served everyone's survival. As he stepped toward the Stargate, feeling the weight of both human hope and divine purpose, O'Neill fell into step beside him. For what it's worth, Jack said quietly, I think you're right. Talking first, shooting second, that's always been your way. Just promise me that if this goes sideways, you'll let Orochi do whatever cosmic thing is necessary to keep you alive. Because I'm not losing you again, Daniel. Not to Gould, not to false gods, not to your own damned nobility. Daniel smiled, feeling the warmth of friendship that transcended even merged divinity. Promise, Jack. Orochi and I both plan to survive this. We've got too much work to do teaching humanity how to walk among the stars responsibly. The Stargate activated, and they stepped through together, toward diplomacy, toward danger, toward the moment when primordial judgment would face false divinity and prove that balance required courage more than power. The galaxy was watching. And for the first time in 10,000 years, Orochi would speak to those who claimed godhood, not with destruction, but with the most radical act of all. Truth spoken without fear of consequence. The neutral world of P2X 338 had earned its sacred status honestly. The planet's natural amphitheater, a crater formed by ancient meteor impact, had been used for millennia as a meeting ground where violence was forbidden by mutual agreement. Even the Gould, who rarely honored anything beyond their own ambitions, respected this place. To break the truce here meant losing access to the only venue where system lords could negotiate without their paranoia triggering mutual destruction. As SG-1 emerged through the Stargate, Daniel's merged awareness felt the planet's unique energy. The ecosystem here had evolved undisturbed by colonization or exploitation, a rare jewel in a galaxy scarred by gold terraforming and resource extraction. Ancient trees surrounded the amphitheater, their root systems so interconnected that Orochi's consciousness felt them as a single vast organism. Life here remembered what balance looked like. Nice place, O'Neill observed, P-90 at low ready despite the truce protocols. Shame it's about to be filled with snakes pretending to be gods. Already, delegations were arriving. Hatak motherships hung in orbit, their distinctive pyramid forms casting shadows across the landscape. Ring transporters hummed as Jaffa warriors materialized in precise formations, staff weapons held ceremonially but clearly ready for combat if the truce broke. Each system lord brought their first prime and honor guard, displays of power as much as security. The Takare had established a neutral zone at the amphitheater center, a raised platform where participants could address the assembly while remaining visible to all parties. Jacob Carter, channeling Selmac's diplomatic experience, stood ready to mediate. His eyes found Daniel and widened slightly at what he saw. The merger had stabilized further over the past day. Daniel no longer glowed with obvious energy, but his presence had changed in subtle ways. He moved with a grace that suggested constant awareness of everything around him. His eyes shifted between human blue-green and brief flashes of emerald when Orochi's consciousness surged forward. And when he stood still, plant life at his feet grew visibly faster, reaching toward him as if recognizing kin. "Sam," Jacob said quietly as they approached, "what exactly are we looking at here? Is that still Daniel or have we lost him to this merger?" "It's still him, Dad." Carter's voice carried absolute certainty. "I've been monitoring his neural patterns. The merger isn't suppression, it's genuine integration. Daniel's personality, memories, and will remain intact, just expanded by Orochi's cosmic perspective. Think of it like gaining a second doctorate in a field you already studied. You're still you, just more informed. Except this particular doctorate comes with the ability to sense planetary ecosystems and potentially pass judgment on civilizations." Jacob's expression mixed concern with admiration. Hell of a thesis defense he's about to give. TLC surveyed the arriving delegations with Warrior's assessment. "I recognize the banners. System Lord Yu arrives with substantial forces. Baal's delegation includes his most loyal underlords. Kali brings representatives from her alliance. This is more than a summit, this is the most significant gathering of gold power in decades. Which means if this goes wrong, we've conveniently assembled most of our enemies in one location." O'Neill's tactical mind never stopped calculating angles. "Daniel, please tell me you've got more planned than just tell them the truth and hope they listen." Daniel smiled, and the expression carried both his own wry humor and Orochi's ancient patience. "Actually, Jack, that's exactly the plan. But I'm not going in alone." He turned to the Hakkesshu, who'd fanned out around SG-1 in protective formation. All 8 were present now. Chris had been joined by the remaining warriors who'd crossed the galaxy. Each represented a different aspect of elemental power, and together they radiated enough energy to make even gold sensors scream warnings. "You'll stand with me," Daniel told them. "Not as my servants or weapons, but as witnesses. The system lords need to see that the Hakkesshu serve balance itself, not Earth's political interests. Your presence demonstrates that Orochi's judgment transcends human authority." Shermie's electricity crackled nervously. "And if they attack? If false gods decide that eliminating you is safer than negotiating? Then we defend ourselves proportionally." Daniel's voice carried command that silenced objections. "Disable, don't kill. Demonstrate power sufficient to protect but not destroy. The moment we match gold brutality, we prove Baal's argument that we're just another threat seeking dominance." A ring transport activated at the amphitheater's edge, and from golden light stepped a figure that commanded immediate attention. System Lord Yu, eldest of the gold, moved with the careful dignity of genuine age. Unlike the younger lords who wore their hosts like costumes, you had inhabited his host so long that the merger was nearly complete. His eyes held calculation sharpened by millennia. Behind him came his first prime, and to everyone's surprise, representatives from the Free Jaffa Rebellion. Bratak, the legendary warrior and TLC's mentor, stood alongside Raknor, a younger rebel leader. Their presence sent ripples through the assembled Jaffa warriors. The rebellion was no longer hiding. TLC, my student. Bratak's weathered face showed rare approval. You bring interesting allies to this gathering. I sense power here that makes even system lords appear small. Master Bratak, I am honored by your presence. TLC clasped arms with his mentor. But I am troubled. The Free Jaffa risk much by attending openly. We risk more by hiding, Raknor interjected. This summit will determine the galaxy's course. If the system lords unite against Earth and this Orochi entity, they will be too distracted to notice the rebellion spreading. If they fracture, we exploit that weakness. Either way, the Free Jaffa benefit from witnessing these events firsthand. More transports activated. Ball arrived with calculated showmanship, minimal guards, projecting confidence that he controlled the narrative. Kali brought seductive menace, her host chosen for beauty as much as functionality. Olakan radiated raw power, his massive frame suggesting he preferred intimidation over subtlety. Camulus, the Celtic war god, studied everything with strategic intensity. And finally, in a transport signature that registered as neither gold nor human, arrived the observer no one had expected, an Asgard. The small gray figure materialized with characteristic Asgard efficiency. Daniel's merged awareness recognized him immediately, Thor, supreme commander of the Asgard fleet and Earth's occasional protector when the replicator crisis allowed. Commander Thor. Hammond's voice came through Daniel's radio, the general monitoring from the SGC. We didn't request Asgard presence. General Hammond. Thor's large eyes surveyed the gathering with scientific curiosity. The Asgard High Council has followed reports of this primordial entity with great interest. A being claiming to predate ancient civilization, possessing energy signatures unknown to our databases, and now merged with a human host from Earth. We wish to observe. And perhaps offer perspective that neither gold nor human may consider. Daniel approached the Asgard, feeling Orochi's consciousness react with recognition. Not of Thor specifically, but of what he represented, a species that had achieved technological transcendence through science rather than parasitism or ascension. Commander Thor, your presence honors us. Though I suspect your interest is more than academic. Indeed, Dr. Jackson. Thor's expression remained neutral, but his tone carried layers of meaning. The Asgard have long sought to understand the balance between technological advancement and biological sustainability. Our cloning crisis stems from prioritizing the former while neglecting the latter. If you truly represent a force advocating balance, we have much to learn from each other. Before Daniel could respond, Baal's amplified voice cut across the amphitheater. Honored system lords, Free Jaffa observers, and unexpected Asgard guests. We gather at my request to address a threat that transcends our usual conflicts. The Tauri have released an entity claiming primordial authority, commanding warriors with unusual powers, and speaking of judgment upon false gods. He gestured toward Daniel. I propose we hear this being's explanation before deciding whether it represents opportunity or extinction. The challenge was masterful, framing the summit as investigation rather than negotiation, putting Daniel in the position of defendant rather than diplomat. But it also gave him the platform he needed. Daniel stepped onto the central platform, and the Hakkesshu arrayed themselves around its perimeter. 8 warriors radiating elemental power, SG-1 standing ready with Earth's best weapons and tactics, the Takare maintaining nervous neutrality, and in the center, an archaeologist merged with a primordial deity about to explain balance to beings who'd forgotten what the word meant. System lords, honored observers, free Jaffa who dare to seek truth beyond worship, Daniel began, and his voice carried harmonic resonance that made even the most arrogant Goa'uld pay attention. Baal speaks truth in part. I am Orochi, given form through merger with Daniel Jackson of Earth. I do command the Hakkesshu warriors. And I do speak of judgment upon false divinity. He let the words settle, watching reactions. Kali's hand moved to a concealed weapon. Alakan's Jaffa raised their staff weapons slightly. You remained perfectly still, calculating. Baal smiled as if his point was proven. But Baal's truth is incomplete, as all System Lord truths are incomplete. You frame judgment as threat because you understand only domination. You assume I seek to replace you because that is what you would do with such power. You cannot imagine that a being of genuine authority might not crave worship, might not desire empire, might not measure worth through subjugation. Daniel's eyes flashed emerald as Orochi's consciousness surged forward, and when he spoke again, the voice carried weight that pressed down on the amphitheater like atmospheric pressure before a storm. I am the judgment Earth creates when humanity forgets balance. I manifest to correct imbalance, to remind civilizations that ecosystems have limits, that growth without sustainability leads to collapse. For 1,800 years at a time, I sleep. And when I wake, I assess whether destruction or teaching serves the greater equilibrium. He gestured to the assembled system lords. You, parasites who claim godhood, represent imbalance incarnate. You enslave entire species, drain worlds of resources, suppress technological and social evolution to maintain your dominance. By every measure of ecological and civilizational health, you are abominations that should be purged. Weapons rose throughout the amphitheater. Jaffa moved to defensive positions. The system lords themselves radiated hostility, and Baal's smile widened. Daniel was proving his point perfectly. And yet, Daniel continued, his voice cutting through rising tension, I do not pronounce that judgment. Do you know why? Because you fear our combined might? Kali's voice dripped venom. Because Earth's military would burn if you triggered our united response? Because destroying you would create worse imbalance than tolerating you? Daniel's answer shocked the assembly into silence. The Goa'uld Empire is dying already. The Free Jaffa rebellion spreads. The Takare undermine you from within. Earth's Stargate command defeats system lords through strategy and alliance. Your false divinity crumbles not through cosmic judgment, but through the natural consequence of unsustainable systems collapsing under their own weight. He moved to the platform's edge, addressing the Jaffa warriors directly. If I pronounced judgment and eradicated every Goa'uld today, what happens to the Jaffa who depend on symbiotes for survival? What happens to the power vacuum across thousands of enslaved worlds? What happens when the system collapses faster than new structures can form? The answer is chaos, suffering, and death on scales that dwarf even Goa'uld atrocities. Bratak's weathered face showed understanding. You speak of balance not as static state, but as managed transition. The collapse of false gods must occur at pace that allows new systems to emerge. Exactly. Daniel turned to the system lords. This is why I do not destroy you despite deserving destruction. Because balance requires patience, requires systems to evolve rather than shatter. The Goa'uld Empire will fall, that is inevitable. But it will fall through internal rebellion, through technological obsolescence, through enslaved peoples choosing freedom. My role is not to accelerate that collapse, but to ensure that when it happens, something better rises from the ashes. You spoke for the first time, his ancient voice carrying genuine curiosity. You claim to be judgment that chooses not to judge. A paradox. What then is your purpose, primordial one? Why manifest at all if not to correct imbalance through action? To witness. To teach. To advocate for those who cannot speak. Daniel felt Orochi's full consciousness flowing through the answer. The ancients sealed me because they feared I would oppose their expansion through the Stargate network. They were right to fear, but wrong about my method. I don't oppose expansion, I oppose exploitation. I don't oppose growth, I oppose unsustainability. I don't oppose power, I oppose power wielded without wisdom. He gestured to SG-1. Earth's Stargate command represents an interesting experiment. Humans who've gained access to ancient technology, who walk among the stars, who face the temptation to become conquerors as the ancients did, as Ugold did. They make mistakes, they disrupt cultures, they introduce technology irresponsibly, they sometimes act from self-interest disguised as altruism. But they also question themselves. They debate the ethics of intervention. They seek allies rather than servants. They're trying to learn. Carter stepped forward, understanding what Daniel needed. System Lords, review our history. Yes, we've defeated gold forces. But we've also freed enslaved populations, shared technology with allies, honored treaties even when breaking them would serve our interests. We're not perfect, but we're actively trying to expand responsibly rather than blindly. And you believe this excuses your harboring of primordial judgment? Camulus's Celtic accent colored his skepticism. You claim independence, yet this Orochi clearly favors humanity. It merged with a human vessel. It defends human expansion. How is this balance rather than bias? Because the vessel questions me constantly. Daniel smiled, and for a moment it was purely his own expression, no divine overlay. Daniel Jackson argues with Orochi's judgments. He forces me to consider human perspective, human needs, human potential for growth. The merger works because we challenge each other, human compassion tempering divine wrath, cosmic perspective expanding human understanding. This is what balance looks like in practice. Not one perspective dominating, but multiple viewpoints creating synthesis. Thor's voice added unexpected weight. The Asgard observed that this merger demonstrates principle we've forgotten. We pursued technological transcendence while abandoning biological diversity. Our cloning crisis stems from that imbalance. A being that advocates for sustainable integration rather than singular dominance serves a purpose we had not considered valuable. Perhaps we were wrong. Ball, sensing the narrative slipping from his control, played his final card. Beautiful philosophy. But philosophy doesn't address practical reality. This being, no matter how benevolent it claims to be, possesses power that threatens every system lord. Power concentrated in one entity, allied with Earth, represents destabilizing force. If we do not act now to contain or destroy it, we face the slow erosion of our authority until this balance leaves us extinct. You're absolutely right, Daniel said, and the agreement visibly shocked Ball. Power concentrated in one entity is destabilizing. Which is why I'm not concentrating it. He turned to the Hakkesshu. These warriors serve balance, not Earth. They will operate independently, advising the SGC when human expansion threatens ecosystems, but also opposing human action when it crosses into exploitation. They will offer the same service to any civilization willing to accept it, including Free Jaffa as they build their new society. Ragnor's eyes widened. You would help us? The Jaffa who served false gods for millennia? You're the Jaffa choosing freedom despite the cost, Shermie corrected, electricity crackling approvingly. You represent the exact kind of balanced transition Lord Orochi advocates. Yes, we will help you build sustainable civilizations rather than merely replacing one empire with another. Daniel continued, addressing the full assembly. And I make this offer to the system lords as well. I know you'll refuse. Your psychology can't accept guidance that doesn't come through domination. But the offer stands. Any Goa'uld who genuinely seeks sustainable governance rather than parasitic exploitation can petition the Hakkesshu for counsel. We won't hold our breath waiting, but the possibility exists. Callie laughed, genuine amusement coloring her scorn. You truly believe a Goa'uld would accept advice from a nature deity about sustainable governance? Our entire existence is parasitic. We are imbalance incarnate, as you said. We cannot change our fundamental nature. Then you'll continue declining until internal rebellion or external pressure destroys you, Daniel said simply. That's not judgment, that's observation of historical patterns. Unsustainable systems collapse. You can adapt or you can cling to failing models until they kill you. Your choice. The amphitheater fell into contemplative silence. The system lords exchanged glances, their certainty shaken. This wasn't the threat Baal had promised, it was something more insidious and harder to combat. A being that refused to be an enemy, that acknowledged their right to exist while simultaneously predicting their inevitable failure, that offered help they couldn't accept without admitting weakness. He rose slowly, his ancient mind working through implications. I am eldest among system lords. I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of false gods who believe themselves eternal. I recognize truth when spoken, even when that truth is uncomfortable. He looked at Daniel with something approaching respect. This Orochi does not threaten us because it does not need to threaten us. We are already dying. The question is whether we die with dignity or in desperate violence. You. Alakan's massive form radiated outrage. You accept this creature's premise. You admit weakness before lesser beings. I admit reality, Alakan. As should you, unless you wish to join the system lords who died believing their own propaganda. You turned to Baal. You called this summit to unite us against a threat. Instead, you have shown us a mirror reflecting our own decline. I, for one, will not wage war against a being whose primary crime is stating obvious truths with irritating patience. Baal's expression remained controlled, but Daniel's merged senses felt the Goa'ul's fury. The carefully constructed alliance was fracturing before it formed. Then you are a fool, Baal said coldly. And when this primordial judgment decides humanity has learned enough, when it pronounces verdict upon our empire and acts with the full force we've witnessed in demonstration, you will remember this moment. You will remember that I warned you, that I offered united resistance, and you chose philosophy over survival. He activated his transport rings. I withdraw from this summit. Those who value their existence over pretty words about balance may contact me directly. We will prepare for the reality you chooses to ignore. Golden light took him, and with him went several minor lords and their Jaffa forces. But not all. Camulus remained, studying Daniel with warrior's calculation. Kali stayed, her expression thoughtful rather than hostile. And you settled back into his position with the patience of genuine age. It seems, Camulus said slowly, that you have fractured Baal's alliance through the simple expedient of telling truths he could not refute. An interesting tactical approach. Very well, Orochi merged with human vessel. You wish to operate independently, serving balance rather than empire. Prove it. Take actions that demonstrate impartiality. Show us you will oppose Earth when Earth overreaches, support Goa'uld interests when they align with sustainability, judge without favoritism. We will, Daniel promised. Starting now. The Hakkesshu will establish presence on worlds throughout the Gate network. Not as conquerors, but as environmental monitors and advisors. When civilizations, human or Goa'uld or otherwise, damage ecosystems beyond sustainability, we'll intervene. When they demonstrate balanced growth, we'll advocate for their protection. And when we're wrong, we'll accept correction and adapt our understanding. Thor approached the platform, his large eyes showing unusual emotion. Dar. Jackson, the Asgard High Council would request formal dialogue with Orochi regarding sustainable technological development. Our cloning crisis requires solutions we cannot discover alone. Perhaps your merged perspective offers insights we've missed. I'd be honored, Commander Thor. Earth's already benefited from Asgard wisdom. Maybe it's time for exchange to flow both directions. The summit continued for hours, detailed discussions of protocols, boundaries, verification methods. The Takare negotiated communication channels. The Free Jaffa established liaison procedures. Even Kali, pragmatic beneath her divine persona, agreed to limited cooperation in areas where gold interests aligned with ecological preservation. As the assembly began to disperse, TLC approached Daniel with Bratak and Raknor. "Daniel Jackson, you have accomplished something I thought impossible," his old friend said quietly. "You have made system lords question their assumptions without firing a single shot." "Master Bratak, what is your assessment?" The old warrior's eyes gleamed. "I assess that the false gods have finally encountered something they cannot fight, cannot corrupt, and cannot ignore. A force that wins through patience rather than violence. The Free Jaffa could learn much from this approach." He bowed slightly to Daniel. "Lord Orochi, if your offer of assistance was genuine, the Jaffa people would welcome Hakkesshu Council as we build a society free from gods both false and true." It was genuine, Daniel assured him. "Sure me, Gonitz. You'll coordinate with the Free Jaffa. Help them establish sustainable governance structures. Make sure their freedom doesn't just replace one empire with another." As night fell on P2X 338, the delegations departed through Rings and Stargate. SG-1 remained until last, ensuring security as the summit ground concluded. O'Neill walked alongside Daniel toward their own gate. "You know Bale's not going to let this go, right? He's going to spend every resource trying to prove you're a threat, to undermine everything we accomplished today." "I know, Jack. But now he's doing it alone instead of leading a System Lord alliance. That's victory enough for today." "Fair point." O'Neill paused at the Stargate, looking at his friend who was no longer quite only his friend. "You okay in there? Still Daniel, still yourself?" Daniel smiled, and it was warm with genuine affection. "Still me, Jack. Just more aware of consequences than I used to be. Orochi doesn't replace my humanity, it reminds me that every choice ripples outward, that balance requires constant attention, that wisdom means accepting complexity rather than demanding simple answers." "That's very philosophical. Also very annoying, which means yeah, you're still you." O'Neill's relief was palpable. "Let's go home. Hammond's going to want a full debrief, and I'm going to want a very large beer." They stepped through the Stargate, leaving behind a galaxy slightly more complicated than when they'd arrived. System lords fractured rather than united. The Free Jaffa gaining unexpected allies. The Asgard considering new approaches to old problems. And Earth, for better or worse, now home to a primordial force that would question every expansion, every decision, every assumption about humanity's place among the stars. Balance wasn't achieved in a day. But today, it had taken one small step forward. 3 weeks after the summit, the consequences of Orochi's diplomatic approach became devastatingly clear. Daniel stood in the SGC briefing room, watching multiple monitor feeds with growing horror. On one screen, a Hakkesshu environmental assessment team reported ecosystem collapse on P7R242, a planet where Earth's mining operations had extracted Naquata without proper ecological surveys. On another, Free Jaffa forces clashed with System Lord loyalists on Chulak, the battle escalating beyond sustainable conflict into mutual destruction. And on the third, Bale's transmission played on repeat, his face twisted with triumphant malice. "So much for primordial judgment," Bale's recorded voice mocked. "Orochi claims to serve balance, yet here we see the results of its interference. Free Jaffa empowered by false promises of sustainability now wage war that kills thousands. Earth's expansion continues unchecked despite Hakkesshu monitoring. And most deliciously, the primordial deity itself stands paralyzed by its own philosophical constraints, unable to act decisively because action might violate its precious principles." The transmission cut to footage. Somehow Ball had obtained recordings of the P7R242 mining site. Daniel recognized the operation immediately. He'd approved it himself 3 weeks ago, assessed the surveys Carter had provided, determined the extraction would remain within sustainable limits. But the footage showed something different. Massive strip mining. Toxic runoff poisoning water systems. Indigenous species dying en masse. No, Daniel's merged consciousness reeled, feeling Orochi's distress as planetary death screamed through their awareness. We checked the environmental impact. Carter's team verified. Sir, those surveys were falsified. Carter's voice was tight with fury as she worked her tablet frantically. Someone in the mining operation doctored the data. The actual extraction rate was 3 times what we approved. By the time the Hakkesshu detected the discrepancy and reported it, the damage was catastrophic. Hammond's expression was granite. Who authorized the increased extraction? That's the problem, sir. Carter pulled up personnel files. The authorization came through proper channels, with proper signatures, all verified through our security protocols. But the signatures themselves were forged using stolen biometric data. Someone very specifically wanted to make it look like the SGC, and by extension, Orochi, approved ecological devastation. O'Neill slammed his fist on the table. Ball. This has his fingerprints all over it. Infiltrate our operations, sabotage our environmental monitoring, then broadcast the failure as proof that Orochi's judgment is worthless. Classic intelligence operation. Indeed, TLC confirmed. And effective. I have received communications from Free Jaffa leaders questioning Hakkesshu Council. If Orochi cannot prevent Earth from damaging worlds, how can it help Jaffa build sustainable civilization? The trust established at the summit erodes rapidly. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness surging with rage, not at Baal's deception, but at the planetary suffering. Through their merged awareness, he felt every dying organism on P7R242, felt the ecosystems collapse like physical pain. The deity within him demanded action, demanded judgment upon those responsible, demanded demonstration of power that would prevent such violations from ever occurring again. But Daniel's human wisdom recognized the trap. If Orochi acted with overwhelming force now, if they punished Earth's personnel for what was ultimately Baal's sabotage, they'd prove the system lord's point, that primordial judgment was reactive violence dressed in philosophical language. We need to respond carefully, Daniel said, forcing calm despite internal turmoil. Baal wants us to either act decisively and prove we're a threat, or do nothing and prove we're ineffective. We need a third option. What third option? Hammond's voice carried command pressure. Dr. Jackson, we have a mining operation that killed thousands of alien organisms, Free Jaffa losing faith in our alliance, and a system lord successfully undermining everything we accomplished at the summit. What response addresses all of that without triggering the exact conflicts we're trying to prevent? Daniel closed his eyes, feeling through the Stargate network with Orochi's expanded senses. The deity's awareness touched thousands of worlds, feeling the health of ecosystems, the balance or imbalance of civilizations, the ripples of consequences spreading from every action. And in that vast web of interconnection, he found the answer. We demonstrate accountability, he said, opening eyes that blazed pure emerald. We acknowledge the failure, accept responsibility despite the sabotage, and we fix it. Publicly. Completely. In a way that proves balance isn't about perfection, it's about learning from mistakes and correcting course. Carter's scientific mind caught the thread. You want to remediate P7R242. Full ecological restoration despite the cost and difficulty. Show that when Earth causes damage, even through sabotage, we take responsibility for healing it. Exactly. And more. Daniel moved to the star map. The Hakkesshu will conduct independent audits of every Earth mining operation, every off-world facility, every colonial outpost. Not to shut them down, but to verify they meet the standards we claim to uphold. When we find violations, and we will find violations, we'll correct them immediately and transparently. That will cost millions in resources and potentially shut down operations critical to Earth's defense, Hammond stated flatly. Dar. Jackson, you're asking me to potentially weaken our position against the Goa'uld to prove a philosophical point. I'm asking you to prove that Earth's expansion serves long-term sustainability rather than short-term exploitation, Daniel corrected. Because if we can't govern ourselves responsibly when given access to the galaxy, we don't deserve that access. That's not philosophy, General, that's practical reality. Unsustainable systems collapse. We either build sustainability into our expansion now, or we repeat the mistakes that led to the Ancients' downfall and the Goa'uld's current decline. O'Neill leaned back, studying his friend with that tactical mind that made him one of Earth's best officers despite his casual demeanor. You're betting everything on humans being better than our worst impulses. You're trusting that if we demonstrate genuine accountability, it'll matter more than Baal's propaganda. That's a hell of a risk, Daniel. It's the only bet worth making, Jack. Daniel felt Orochi's ancient patience supporting his conviction. Because the alternative is accepting that humanity can't be trusted with galactic expansion, can't learn from mistakes, can't choose wisdom over expedience. And if that's true, then maybe Baal's right. Maybe primordial judgment should oppose human expansion rather than guide it. The room fell silent as the weight of that statement settled. Finally, Hammond spoke with the decisiveness that defined his command. Very well. Major Carter, coordinate with the Hakkesshu for comprehensive environmental audits of all Earth off-world operations. Colonel O'Neill, assemble a team for P7R-242 remediation, whatever resources are needed, you'll have them. Dr. Jackson, you'll broadcast our response to the same channels Baal used for his accusations. Make it clear that Earth accepts accountability and corrects mistakes rather than hiding from them. Sir, one more thing. Daniel's merged awareness had detected something troubling in the data streams. The sabotage on P7R-242 required detailed knowledge of our operations and security protocols. Baal had inside help. We have a spy or a compromised system somewhere in the SGC. Carter's expression shifted to grim determination. I'll run full security sweeps. If there's a breach, I'll find it. Do it quietly, O'Neill ordered. If Baal knows we're hunting for his asset, he'll either extract them or use them for more sabotage. We need to identify the leak without tipping our hand. The remediation of P7R-242 became the most ambitious ecological restoration project Earth had ever attempted. SG teams worked alongside Hakkesshu environmental specialists, TalkRA providing biotechnology expertise, and surprisingly, a contingent of free Jaffa volunteers who'd decided that learning sustainable practices served their people's future. Daniel stood at the edge of what had been a strip mine, now being transformed back into living ecosystem. Shermie used controlled lightning to stimulate dormant seeds in the soil. Gonit's winds distributed spores and microorganisms across devastated areas. Chris, his earlier zealotry channeled into constructive action, used carefully controlled flame to clear toxic residues while leaving beneficial minerals intact. And Daniel himself, merged with Orochi, touched the wounded planet's consciousness and felt its slow, painful healing. It's working, Carter reported, scanner showing gradually improving biodiversity markers. The indigenous species are responding to the restoration faster than our models predicted. It's like the ecosystem remembers what it was and wants to return to that state. All living systems seek equilibrium, Daniel said, Orochi's wisdom flowing through the explanation. We're not creating something new, we're removing the barriers preventing natural recovery. This is what balance looks like in practice. Not preventing all damage, but ensuring that damage doesn't exceed the system's capacity to heal. Ragnar approached, the Free Jaffa leader having personally joined the remediation effort. Lord Orochi, I must apologize. When Baal's accusations first emerged, many among my people doubted your commitment to genuine balance. We believed the sabotage revealed inherent human hypocrisy. But witnessing this, the resources committed, the labor invested, the transparency of the process, we see now that accountability matters more than perfection. Don't apologize for doubt, Daniel said firmly. Doubt serves balance by preventing blind faith. The Jaffa spent millennia trusting false gods without question. Questioning new allies, demanding proof of their principles through action, that's wisdom, not weakness. Bratak, overseeing Jaffa volunteers, nodded approval. Well spoken. The free Jaffa nation will not be built on replacing one object of worship with another. We must learn to evaluate actions, not just words. This restoration demonstrates that Earth, at least, can be held accountable and will accept the cost of its mistakes. A communication alert chimed. O'Neill's voice came through Daniel's radio. Daniel, we've got incoming wormhole. It's Thor. Says the Asgard have been monitoring our remediation efforts and want to discuss something urgently. Minutes later, the small gray commander materialized via Asgard transport beam. His large eyes surveyed the restoration work with evident interest before focusing on Daniel. Dr. Jackson, the Asgard High Council has completed preliminary analysis of Orochi's approach to balance. We find ourselves humbled. Thor's admission carried unusual emotion. We believed our cloning crisis resulted from insufficient technological sophistication. Your remediation here demonstrates that we misdiagnosed our problem. We pursued advancement while neglecting biological sustainability, exactly as you warned at the summit. Commander Thor, are you saying? The Asgard request formal partnership with Orochi and the Hakkesshu. Thor's statement sent shockwaves through everyone present. We wish to learn sustainable integration of technology and biology. In exchange, we offer our scientific resources to support Earth's environmental monitoring and restoration efforts. Together, we might solve both our people's challenges, your need for defense technology, our need for biological viability. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness analyzing the implications. An alliance with the Asgard would provide Earth with technological advantages far beyond current capabilities. It would also demonstrate that primordial judgment attracted allies rather than just creating conflicts. But it would also change the galactic power balance significantly. What does the High Council propose specifically? Daniel asked carefully. Joint Research Initiative. Asgard scientists working with Hakkesshu environmental specialists and Earth Stargate Command to develop technologies that enhance rather than exploit planetary ecosystems. We would share our cloning research, you would share Orochi's understanding of biological balance. Together, we might develop solutions neither faction could achieve alone. Carter's mind was already racing through possibilities. Sir, if we could integrate Asgard biotechnology with environmental restoration techniques, we could remediate damaged worlds in months instead of years. We could also potentially solve their cloning degradation by introducing sustainable biological diversity back into their genetic templates. And we would gain defensive technologies that don't require exploiting planetary resources, Daniel added, feeling Orochi's approval of the symbiotic relationship. Commander Thor, the Hakkesshu and I accept your proposal. But with one condition, this partnership includes the Free Jaffa as well. They're building a civilization from scratch and need sustainable technological development as much as anyone. Thor's expression might have been a smile, though Asgard features made it difficult to tell. Agreed. The Free Jaffa have demonstrated remarkable growth from warrior culture to nascent democratic society. Their inclusion serves all our interests. As Thor departed to formalize the agreement with the High Council, O'Neill pulled Daniel aside. Okay, that just happened. We went from environmental disaster and potential spy in our ranks to forming a three-way alliance with the Asgard and Free Jaffa. Daniel, you're either the luckiest diplomat in the galaxy or Orochi's judgment is actually working. Probably both, Daniel admitted. But Jack, we still have problems. The spy, Bale's ongoing sabotage attempts, system lords who rejected the summit's conclusions. This alliance helps, but it also paints a bigger target on our backs. One crisis at a time. O'Neill looked at the restoration work progressing around them. Right now, we're proving that when Earth screws up, we fix it. That message matters, especially to potential allies watching to see if we're worthy of the power we're accumulating. An urgent communication interrupted them, Carter's voice tight with discovery and anger. Sir, I found the security breach. You're not going to like this. The revelation came in the SGC briefing room an hour later, with SG-1, Select Hakkesshu, and Hammond assembled for what Carter's tone suggested would be devastating news. The sabotage wasn't external infiltration, she began, pulling up personnel files. It was internal corruption. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, assigned to off-world mining operations oversight. He'd been falsifying environmental reports for 8 months, taking bribes from private contractors who wanted to exceed extraction limits. When Bale's agents contacted him, he saw an opportunity to escape accountability by framing the entire SGC. Chen sold us out to Ball. O'Neill's voice carried lethal calm. How much damage did he do beyond P7 or 242? At least 4 other mining operations were running beyond sustainable limits based on his falsified reports. 2 more are questionable pending full audits. And he provided Ball with detailed information on our security protocols, gate schedules, and personnel assignments. Hammond's expression was carved from stone. Where is Lieutenant Chen now? Custody, sir. He was attempting to flee through an unauthorized gate connection when security detained him. He's demanding immunity in exchange for information about Bale's spy network. He gets nothing, Hammond stated flatly. He betrayed Earth, endangered allied relationships, and caused ecological disasters that killed thousands of organisms. Court-martial proceedings begin immediately. Daniel stood, feeling Orochi's consciousness wrestling with the situation. Chen deserved punishment, his actions had caused tremendous harm. But the deity's ancient wisdom recognized something else in the pattern. General, before we proceed with court-martial, I'd like permission to speak with Chen. Dr. Jackson, this isn't a counseling situation. I know, sir. But there's something here beyond simple corruption. Chen's a decorated officer with 8 years of exemplary service. People don't just flip from dedicated soldier to traitor without reason. If Bale's systematically identifying and corrupting Earth personnel, we need to understand his methodology to prevent future compromises. Hammond considered, then nodded. 1 hour. But Dr. Jackson, if he compromised our operations, he faces full consequences regardless of his motivations. The holding cell was Spartan, reinforced walls, force field barrier, constant monitoring. Lieutenant Chen sat on the edge of the bunk, head in his hands, the picture of a man whose world had collapsed. When Daniel entered, Chen looked up with a mixture of shame and defiance. Come to judge me, Dr. Jackson. Or should I say, Lord Orochi? His voice carried bitter resignation. Go ahead. Tell me I'm an imbalance that needs correcting. That I betrayed everything we stand for. I already know. Daniel sat across from him, letting Orochi's awareness feel the man's emotional state, not to invade privacy, but to understand context. What he sensed was complex. Genuine remorse mixed with desperate rationalization, fear beneath false bravado, and underneath it all, a profound exhaustion. What happened, Marcus? Daniel's voice carried no judgment, just question. Your record shows commitment to Earth's mission. You volunteered for dangerous assignments, received commendations for integrity. What changed? Chen laughed bitterly. What changed? I woke up. I realized we're doing to the galaxy exactly what we claim to oppose. We talk about freedom and exploration while exploiting alien worlds for resources. We criticize the Goa'uld for enslaving populations while we extract Naquata that indigenous species depend on for survival. We're hypocrites with better PR. So you decided to expose that hypocrisy by making it worse? Daniel's challenge was gentle but direct. By falsifying reports, enabling even greater exploitation, working with Ball. I decided to profit from inevitable corruption instead of being destroyed by it. Chen's defenses were crumbling. Do you know how many times I filed accurate reports showing we were exceeding sustainable limits? How many times my superiors told me to reassess my findings because the mission required those resources? I tried playing by the rules, Dr. Jackson. The rules betrayed me. Daniel felt Orochi's understanding flow through him. This wasn't simple corruption, this was idealism turning toxic when confronted with systemic failures. Chen had seen genuine problems, received inadequate response, and concluded that the entire system was irredeemable. From there, corruption became self-fulfilling prophecy. You were right about some of it, Daniel admitted, and Chen's head snapped up in surprise. The SGC has made mistakes. We've prioritized military necessity over environmental sustainability. We've exploited worlds we should have protected. Your reports that got dismissed, some of them identified real problems that we should have addressed. Then why? Because you responded to real problems by making them catastrophically worse. Daniel's merged voice carried both compassion and firmness. You saw hypocrisy and decided to embody it perfectly. You identified exploitation and decided to profit from it. You recognized systemic failures and instead of fighting to fix them, you used them as justification for betrayal. Chen's hands trembled. What was I supposed to do? One person can't change a system designed to prioritize Earth's survival over alien ecosystems. You're right. One person can't change a system alone. Daniel leaned forward. But you weren't alone, Marcus. You had colleagues who shared your concerns. You had environmental advocacy groups within the SGC. You had me. Orochi exists specifically to raise these issues at the highest levels. Instead of organizing, instead of building coalitions for reform, you gave up and sold out. That's not awakening. That's surrendering to the very corruption you claimed to oppose. For a long moment, Chen just stared. Then tears started, and the facade of defiance shattered completely. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought if I could just document the hypocrisy, force accountability through exposure, maybe someone would finally listen. But Baal's agents, they offered resources, protection, and I was tired of fighting alone. I was so tired. Daniel felt Orochi's judgment crystallizing, not into punishment, but into understanding that would serve greater purposes. Marcus, you're going to face court-martial. You're going to be held accountable for the damage you caused. That's justice, and it's necessary. But I'm going to recommend something in addition to whatever sentence you receive. What? That your testimony about systemic failures and environmental oversight be formally entered into the SGC record. That the legitimate concerns you identified before your corruption be addressed through policy reform. That your falls serve as a warning not just about betrayal, but about what happens when good people become so disillusioned they abandon their principles entirely. Chen's expression showed desperate hope. You do that? Use my mistakes to actually fix the problems. That's what balance means, Marcus. Acknowledging failures, learning from them, building better systems. You crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. But the legitimate issues you identified before crossing those lines deserve attention. Your corruption doesn't erase the truth of your original concerns. It just demonstrates the catastrophic cost of addressing problems through betrayal rather than reform. Daniel stood. The Hakkesshu are conducting full environmental audits of all Earth operations. The Asgard are partnering with us to develop sustainable technologies. The Free Jaffa are learning from our mistakes as they build their civilization. Your betrayal accelerated reforms that should have happened years ago. That doesn't excuse what you did. But it does mean your failure will serve a purpose beyond simple punishment. As Daniel left the cell, Chen's voice followed him. Dr. Jackson, thank you. For seeing me as more than just a traitor. For understanding that good intentions don't excuse bad actions, but bad actions don't erase legitimate grievances either. Daniel paused at the door. That's the hardest lesson Orochi has taught me, Marcus. That judgment requires holding multiple truths simultaneously. That people can be both victim and perpetrator, that systems can fail good people while people fail good systems, that accountability and compassion aren't opposites. Balance isn't about simple answers. It's about accepting complexity and working toward better outcomes despite that complexity. The door closed, leaving Chen to face his consequences with at least the hope that his failures would serve greater purposes. And Daniel, merged with primordial judgment, returned to the work of proving that humanity could learn from its worst mistakes and build something better from the ruins of its compromised ideals. The galaxy was watching. Some, like Baal, waited for failure to vindicate their cynicism. Others, like the Asgard and Free Jaffa, hoped for success that would validate their trust. Either way, the test of balance continued. 6 months after the P7R-242 remediation, the galaxy had fundamentally shifted in ways both subtle and dramatic. Daniel stood in the newly constructed Hakkesshu Environmental Coordination Center. A facility built adjacent to the SGC specifically to monitor Earth's off-world operations and coordinate with allied civilizations. Holographic displays showed real-time ecological data from hundreds of worlds touched by the Stargate network. Green indicators marked sustainable operations. Yellow flagged areas requiring attention. Red demanded immediate intervention. The board was mostly green now. But it had taken tremendous work to reach this point. Morning, Daniel. Carter entered carrying coffee and datapads, her uniform now bearing an additional insignia, Environmental Operations Liaison, a position created specifically to integrate Hakkesshu oversight with SGC command structure. The Asgard sent updated biotechnology specifications. Thor thinks we can reduce the remediation timeline for P9X, 447 by 40% if we implement their latest protocols. That's the mining world with the crystalline ecosystem, right? Daniel accepted the coffee, his merged consciousness automatically accessing Orochi's awareness of that planet's unique biology. The one where we initially thought the crystals were geological formations but they're actually colonial organisms. Exactly. We almost strip-mined a sentient species because our sensors weren't calibrated to recognize silicon-based life signatures. Carter's expression showed the professional embarrassment of a scientist who'd missed something fundamental. That's what, the 4th time Hakkesshu environmental sweeps have caught something our technology missed. 5th, actually. But who's counting? Daniel smiled, then sobered. Though it's worth noting that Orochi's awareness isn't infallible either. We missed the tungsten contamination on P2X-116 until Jaffa agricultural specialists detected crop failures. Balance requires multiple perspectives, not just divine judgment. Shermi materialized through the door, literally, her form riding a controlled lightning arc that was her preferred method of rapid transit within the facility. Lord Orochi, we have situation requiring your attention. Free Jaffa colony on Erebus reports unusual energy signatures near their agricultural zones. Initial scans suggest possible gold infiltration, but the pattern doesn't match known technology. Before Daniel could respond, alarms blared throughout the SGC. Hammond's voice crackled through the intercom system. Dr. Jackson, Colonel O'Neill, report to the gate room immediately. We have incoming wormhole with emergency authorization codes from the talk array. Multiple sources. The gate room was controlled chaos when they arrived. The Stargate's event horizon shimmered with that familiar blue light, and through it stumbled Jacob Carter, his face showing the strain of Selmac's accelerated healing working overtime on visible injuries. Dad! Carter rushed forward as medics converged. What happened? All happened. Jacob's voice alternated between his own and Selmac's as the symbiote fought to keep the host alive. He's done something. Something we didn't see coming. The Stargate activated again. Through it came Takare operatives carrying wounded, their expressions showing the shell shock of people who'd witnessed something impossible. And then, making everyone in the gate room freeze, a Jaffa warrior stepped through. Not in the armor of System Lord service, but in the simple garments of the free Jaffa nation. Blood streamed from a head wound, and he carried a staff weapon that looked like it had been through prolonged combat. I am Orochi, first of Erebus colony. The Jaffa's voice carried urgency that transcended pain. We are under attack. Not by gold forces as we initially believed, but by something else. Something that uses gold technology but serves a different master. We sent for aid because, he caught sight of Daniel and his eyes widened with recognition. Lord Orochi. Thank the balance you are here. The attackers, they speak of you. They claim to act in the name of judgment. Daniel's blood ran cold as Orochi's consciousness surged with alarmed recognition. Describe them. Warriors carrying elemental power. Fire, lightning, wind, abilities matching Hakkesshu descriptions. But they do not seek to restore balance. They pronounce sentence on our colony, claiming that Jaffa who once served false gods cannot be trusted with freedom, that redemption requires purification through Chris. The name escaped Daniel's lips as terrible understanding crystallized. He's gone rogue again. Shermie's electricity erupted around her, crackling with barely controlled fury. Impossible. Chris accepted your judgment, Lord Orochi. He's been serving with Free Jaffa development teams, helping establish sustainable agriculture on liberated worlds. I vouched for him personally. Then either you were deceived or something changed. O'Neill's tactical assessment was brutal and accurate. Either way, we've got Hakkesshu warriors attacking a Free Jaffa colony using the exact rhetoric Ball claimed would happen, primordial judgment deciding who deserves to exist. This is a nightmare scenario. Jacob had recovered enough to speak coherently. It's worse than one rogue Hakkesshu. According to Takare intelligence, Chris has gathered followers. Jaffa who believe the free nation hasn't gone far enough in rejecting their past, environmental extremists who think any civilization using technology represents imbalance, even some humans from colonies that suffered gold attacks. He's building an army dedicated to enforcing what he calls pure judgment. And Baal's been feeding him intelligence and resources, Daniel realized with sick certainty. Helping him identify targets, providing gold technology to enhance his warriors' capabilities, all while positioning it as Orochi's judgment running out of control. It's the perfect sabotage, discredit primordial balance by supporting someone who takes it to zealous extremes. Carter was already at the control panel, bringing up sensor data and communications. Sir, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures consistent with Hakkesshu power levels across 7 different worlds, all Free Jaffa colonies or Earth environmental restoration sites. Chris isn't just attacking Erebus. He's launching coordinated strikes against everything we've built over the past 6 months. Hammond's command voice cut through rising panic. Colonel O'Neill, assemble SG teams for immediate deployment to Erebus. Major Carter, coordinate with Asgard allies. If they can provide transport capacity, we need to respond to multiple sites simultaneously. Dr. Jackson, I need options for containing this without proving Baal's propaganda correct. There's only one option that addresses the core problem. Daniel felt Orochi's ancient wisdom and his own tactical experience aligning perfectly. I confront Chris directly. Not with overwhelming force, not with System Lord alliance, but as Orochi merged with human judgment. I prove that balance doesn't mean extremism, that judgment includes mercy, that the path Chris has chosen serves destruction, not sustainability. TLC stepped forward, staff weapon in hand. I will accompany Daniel Jackson. I have experience with warriors who believe their cause justifies atrocities. Sometimes such warriors require physical demonstration that their path leads nowhere good. As will I. Shermie's form crackled with controlled lightning. Chris is my brother in service. If he has truly betrayed Lord Orochi's teachings, I will stop him. But I will also ensure he faces judgment from family, not strangers. Gonits materialized through wind currents, his expression grave. All Hakkesshu who remain loyal to balanced judgment will join this mission. Chris's extremism threatens everything we've worked to build. If we do not stop him decisively, every alliance, every reform, every demonstration of restraint becomes meaningless. Then we're looking at potential civil war among cosmic warriors with elemental powers. O'Neill loaded his P-90 with grim efficiency. Just another Tuesday for SG-1. Daniel, what's the play when we get to Erebus? Daniel's eyes blazed emerald as Orochi's full consciousness surged forward. We evacuate civilians first. Then we contain Chris's forces without killing if possible. These are zealots who believe they're serving a righteous cause, not inherently evil beings. And finally, I challenge Chris to single combat. Not to the death, but to demonstrate that his interpretation of judgment is flawed, that balance requires nuance he's abandoned. Single combat? Hammond's expression showed deep skepticism. Dr. Jackson, you're proposing to fight a warrior who's dedicated his existence to battle while you're a scholar who happens to host a primordial entity. How do you expect to win? Because I don't have to win through violence, sir. Daniel felt both his own conviction and Orochi's ancient certainty supporting the answer. I have to win through demonstration that strength includes restraint, that power serves wisdom rather than dominating through fear, that judgment balanced by compassion achieves what judgment driven by wrath cannot. If I can prove that in front of Chris's followers, if I can show them that their leader's path contradicts the very principles he claims to serve, the movement collapses from internal contradiction rather than external force. Carter handed him a tactical vest, her expression mixing concern with understanding. And if Chris won't accept your challenge? If he's truly committed to extremist purification regardless of philosophy? Then the Hakkesshu and I stop him with whatever force proves necessary. Daniel's voice carried steel beneath compassion. Because balance ultimately requires that those who claim to serve it actually demonstrate that service through actions, not just rhetoric. Chris's zealotry threatens the entire foundation we've built. That cannot stand. The Stargate activated as coordinates locked for Erebus. Through the shimmering event horizon, they could see nothing but the standard energy pattern. But Daniel's merged senses felt the turmoil beyond, ecosystems stressed by combat, life forces winking out as battle raged, and beneath it all, a familiar consciousness twisted by righteous fury into something dangerous and unrecognizable. SG-1, move out. Hammond's order carried the weight of galactic consequences. Bring our people home. Stop this extremism. And for God's sake, prove that balance works better than zealotry. The entire galaxy is watching to see if primordial judgment serves wisdom or just gives cosmic sanction to violence. They stepped through the gate. Soldiers, scientists, cosmic warriors, an emerged being carrying the burden of proving that judgment tempered by mercy could stand against judgment driven by absolute conviction. Erebus waited on the other side. A free Jaffa colony built on principles of sustainable agriculture and democratic governance, now burning under the assault of warriors who claimed that freedom required purification, that balance demanded purity, that judgment served only through absolute enforcement. The battle for Orochi's soul was about to begin. The scene on Erebus was worse than Daniel's worst fears. What had been a thriving agricultural settlement, terraced fields utilizing ancient irrigation technology, communal structures built from locally sourced materials, free Jaffa families learning to govern themselves without system lord masters, was now a war zone. Chris stood at the colony's center like an avenging angel from humanity's darkest mythologies. Purple flames wreathed his form, and his crimson eyes blazed with absolute certainty. Around him, his followers fought with coordinated precision, Jaffa wielding staff weapons alongside their own combat techniques, human extremists using stolen gold technology, and scattered among them, 3 more Hakkesshu warriors whose powers created a devastating combination with conventional weapons. But they weren't killing indiscriminately. Daniel's merged awareness recognized that immediately. Chris's forces were disabling, containing, separating combatants from civilians. It was a controlled assault, almost surgical in its precision. Which made it more terrifying. This wasn't random violence. This was organized judgment being executed with terrible efficiency. Citizens of Erebus. Chris's voice, amplified by whatever technology Baal had provided, rang across the settlement. You claim freedom from false gods, yet you built your society using technology stolen from those same gods. You speak of balance while consuming resources, establishing hierarchies, perpetuating systems that led to your enslavement. True freedom requires purification, rejection of all gold influence, all technological dependence, return to natural balance as Orochi intended before human compromise corrupted divine judgment. That's not what I taught him. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper, but Orochi's consciousness raged within the merged form. That's not balance. That's regression disguised as purity. Shermie's lightning crackled with fury. He's perverted everything. Lord Orochi advocates sustainable use of technology, not its complete rejection. This is zealotry wearing the mask of environmental consciousness. Then we unmask it. O'Neill signaled the SG teams. Combat teams, establish perimeter and begin civilian evacuation. Medical personnel, triage the wounded. Dr. Jackson, Hakkesshu, you've got your philosophical showdown. We'll handle the tactical situation. Daniel stepped forward, and Orochi's power blazed outward, not as attack, but as presence. Every combatant in the settlement felt it, that primordial awareness that had existed before civilizations rose and fell, that had witnessed every iteration of balance and imbalance across human history. Chris's forces froze, their certainty wavering as they felt the genuine article rather than their leader's interpretation. Chris. Daniel's merged voice carried across the settlement with irresistible authority. Stand down. What you're doing here isn't judgment, it's terror. It's not balance. It's extremism. And it betrays everything Orochi represents. Chris turned, and for a moment, genuine conflict showed in his eyes. Then his jaw set with renewed conviction. Lord Orochi, you have been compromised. The human vessel has corrupted your judgment with compassion that serves human expansion rather than planetary balance. I act as you would have acted before the merger, with absolute commitment to restoring equilibrium regardless of cost. No. Daniel moved through the combat zone, and warriors on both sides parted before him unconsciously. You act as you believe I would have acted, but you're wrong. Even before the merger with Daniel Jackson, even in my most wrathful manifestations, Orochi understood something fundamental that you've forgotten: balance is not static perfection. It's dynamic adaptation. It's systems finding equilibrium through change, not forcing stasis through purification. He gestured to the settlement around them. These free Jaffa use gold technology, yes. But they use it to feed themselves, to build shelter, to create communities based on choice rather than slavery. They're adapting tools of oppression into instruments of liberation. That's not imbalance, that's evolution. Evolution that consumes resources. Chris's flames intensified. Evolution that establishes new hierarchies. Evolution that will eventually lead them to become exactly what they escaped. Masters seeking servants, consuming the galaxy as the Goa'uld did. Maybe. Daniel's admission shocked everyone, including Chris. Maybe you're right that any civilization using technology risks exploitation. Maybe sustainable expansion is impossible and all growth eventually becomes destructive. But you're proposing to enforce that assumption through violence before giving them the chance to prove otherwise. That's not judgment, Chris. That's prophecy you're fulfilling through preemptive destruction. TLC moved to Daniel's side, his presence radiating the moral authority of someone who'd actually lived the journey Chris claimed to judge. I was Jaffa serving false gods. I killed in their name. I enforced slavery and worshipped parasites. By your logic, Chris of the Hakkesshu, I am irredeemable, too tainted by that past to deserve freedom or trust. Yet Daniel Jackson offered me the chance to choose differently. SG-1 trusted me despite my history. And through that trust, I became part of the rebellion that freed my people. Would you deny others that same possibility for redemption? Chris's crimson eyes blazed with internal struggle. You are exception, TLC. Your choice to rebel demonstrates capacity for balance. But these colonists, they do not rebel against technology, against hierarchy, against the patterns that create imbalance. They simply change masters from gold system lords to their own democratic councils. He gestured to the settlement around them. These free Jaffa use gold technology, yes. But they use it to feed themselves, to build shelter, to create communities based on choice rather than slavery. They're adapting tools of oppression into instruments of liberation. That's not imbalance, that's evolution. Evolution that consumes resources. Chris's flames intensified. Evolution that establishes new hierarchies. Evolution that will eventually lead them to become exactly what they escaped. Masters seeking servants, consuming the galaxy as the Goa'uld did. Maybe. Daniel's admission shocked everyone, including Chris. Maybe you're right that any civilization using technology risks exploitation. Maybe sustainable expansion is impossible and all growth eventually becomes destructive. But you're proposing to enforce that assumption through violence before giving them the chance to prove otherwise. That's not judgment, Chris. That's prophecy you're fulfilling through preemptive destruction. TLC moved to Daniel's side, his presence radiating the moral authority of someone who'd actually lived the journey Chris claimed to judge. I was Jaffa serving false gods. I killed in their name. I enforced slavery and worshipped parasites. By your logic, Chris of the Hakkesshu, I am irredeemable, too tainted by that past to deserve freedom or trust. Yet Daniel Jackson offered me the chance to choose differently. SG-1 trusted me despite my history. And through that trust, I became part of the rebellion that freed my people. Would you deny others that same possibility for redemption? Chris's crimson eyes blazed with internal struggle. You are exception, TLC. Your choice to rebel demonstrates capacity for balance. But these colonists, they do not rebel against technology, against hierarchy, against the patterns that create imbalance. They simply change masters from gold system lords to their own democratic councils. The structure remains oppressive even if the faces change. Then you fundamentally misunderstood what Orochi represents. Daniel felt the deity's consciousness flowing completely into his voice now, human compassion and primordial wisdom speaking as one. Balance is not the absence of structure, it's structure that serves sustainability rather than exploitation. Democratic councils where every voice is heard represent better balance than system lord tyranny even if both involve hierarchy. Agricultural technology that feeds communities without destroying ecosystems represents better balance than rejecting all technology and returning to subsistence that limits population growth through starvation. You're confusing purity with balance, Chris. They're not the same thing. The settlement had gone silent. Free Jaffa, Chris's followers, SG teams, and Hakkesshu all watched the confrontation with the understanding that this moment would determine far more than one colony's fate. Chris's flames dimmed slightly. Then prove it, Lord Orochi. Prove that compromise serves balance better than purity. Prove that your merged judgment, tainted by human attachment, achieves what absolute conviction cannot. Prove it not through words, but through the trial your merged consciousness can understand, combat. You against me, human vessel and divine consciousness against zealous certainty. The winner's interpretation of judgment stands. The loser accepts that their path was flawed. Daniel felt Orochi's ancient warrior spirit responding to the challenge even as his human tactical mind recognized the trap. If he refused, Chris would claim moral victory, judgment afraid to enforce itself. If he accepted and won through overwhelming power, he'd prove Chris's point that might makes right. But if he accepted and demonstrated restraint even in victory, I accept your challenge, Chris. But with conditions. Daniel stepped into the open ground that had become an impromptu arena. We fight until one of us yields or is incapacitated. Not to the death, because balance requires that even those who err catastrophically deserve the chance to learn from mistakes rather than being eliminated. And we fight witnessed by everyone here, so that both your followers and mine can judge which interpretation of balance serves life better. Chris's form erupted with purple flame as he moved to face Daniel. Agreed. And Lord Orochi, when I prove that absolute commitment to balance surpasses compromised compassion, you will acknowledge that the human vessel corrupted your judgment. You will separate the merger and return to pure primordial consciousness serving ecological truth rather than political convenience. And when you lose, Daniel countered, emerald energy beginning to swirl around him, you will accept that zealotry serves ego rather than balance, that your extremism betrayed the very principles you claim to uphold, and you will submit to judgment from the collective wisdom of Hakkesshu, Free Jaffa, and allied civilizations who've actually built sustainable systems rather than just destroyed unsustainable ones. The two warriors faced each other. Chris representing absolute conviction that purity equaled balance, Daniel embodying the harder truth that balance required nuance, compromise, and constant adaptation rather than rigid enforcement of idealized principles. Begin. Shermie's voice cracked like lightning, and the battle for Orochi's soul commenced. Chris attacked first, purple flames erupting in geometric patterns that demonstrated both his millennia of combat experience and the enhancements Baal's technology provided. Fire that could melt steel, energy that could crack stone, power sufficient to overwhelm conventional defenses through sheer overwhelming force. But Daniel didn't meet force with force. Instead, Orochi's consciousness flowed through the merged form, and where Chris's flames sought to destroy. Daniel's emerald energy redirected, absorbed, transformed destructive power into dispersed heat that warmed the air without burning. You defend, Chris snarled, attacking again with increased intensity. You do not strike back. This is weakness disguised as mercy. This is strength that doesn't require proving itself through harm. Daniel moved with liquid grace, evading rather than blocking, deflecting rather than countering. Every strike you throw, I could return tenfold. Every flame you generate, Orochi could match with storms that would scour this settlement to bedrock. But what would that prove, Chris? That I'm more powerful. We both already know that. The question is whether power serves wisdom or just enforces will. Chris's attacks grew more desperate, more furious. He was losing and he knew it, not because Daniel was winning through superior combat skill, but because the fight itself was exposing the emptiness of his philosophy. Absolute judgment without mercy was just violence with cosmic justification. Purity enforced through destruction served nothing but the enforcer's ego. No. Chris's flames exploded outward in a devastating radius attack that forced even SG teams to take cover. I will not accept that balance requires compromise. I will not accept that judgment serves political convenience. I will not accept that millennia of service, of witnessing ecological collapse, of knowing the truth of imbalance means nothing compared to 6 months of diplomatic theater. The fire cleared, and Chris stood at the center of a scorched circle, breathing heavily, his form flickering with exhaustion. And across from him, Daniel remained untouched, surrounded by a barrier of emerald energy that had simply absorbed the assault without effort. Chris. Daniel's voice carried infinite sadness. You're not fighting me. You're fighting the reality that absolute certainty is easier than complex truth. You're fighting the fear that if balance requires nuance, maybe you've been wrong for centuries. You're fighting the possibility that your pain and anger, justified as they are by witnessing galactic suffering, don't automatically translate into wisdom about how to fix that suffering. The younger warrior's flames died completely. He fell to his knees, and when he looked up, his crimson eyes showed not fury but desperate confusion. Then what was the point? His voice cracked. What was the point of millennia watching the galaxy burn while Lord Orochi slept imprisoned? What was the point of hiding, of waiting, of maintaining faith that judgment would return and restore balance? If that judgment now says that patience and compromise serve better than decisive action, what was the point of all that suffering? Daniel approached slowly, dropping his own defensive energy to stand vulnerable before the confused warrior. The point was that you bore witness, Chris. You saw what imbalance looks like. You carried that knowledge through ages when no one else remembered that ecosystems mattered, that balance existed, that there were truths beyond power and conquest. And now, when judgment finally returns, your witnessing serves a crucial purpose. It reminds us all of the cost of failure, of what happens when civilizations forget sustainability. He knelt beside Chris, placing a hand on the warrior's shoulder. But witnessing suffering doesn't mean repeating it in reverse. Your millennia of pain don't justify inflicting new pain. Your righteous anger doesn't excuse extremism. The point of all that suffering, Chris, was to ensure that when balance finally had the chance to influence galactic civilization, it did so with full knowledge of the consequences of both imbalance and overcorrection. Chris's form began to shake, and then suddenly he was weeping, not the tears of a defeated enemy, but the release of someone who'd carried impossible burdens for too long, who tried to find meaning in suffering through absolute conviction, and who just realized that meaning wasn't where he thought it would be. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Lord Orochi. I thought I was serving you. I thought absolute judgment was what you needed. I thought compromise was weakness. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Around the settlement, Chris's followers lowered their weapons. The spell of absolute certainty was broken, and in its place came the harder work of examining assumptions, questioning zealotry, recognizing that good intentions didn't excuse harmful actions. Shermie stepped forward, tears streaming down her own face. "Brother, we all felt the temptation. We all wanted simple answers to complex problems. But Lord Orochi teaches us that balance is never simple, never absolute, never certain. It's constant work, constant adjustment, constant willingness to question even our most cherished beliefs." Daniel stood, addressing not just Chris but all the assembled witnesses, Free Jaffa, Hakkesshu, SG teams, even the Takare observers who'd arrived during the confrontation. This is what balance looks like in practice. Not destroying those who err, but teaching them. Not enforcing purity through violence, but building sustainability through cooperation. Not absolute judgment from on high, but collective wisdom from diverse perspectives. Chris made terrible mistakes today. He will face consequences, will have to work to rebuild trust, will carry the weight of this error. But he will also have the chance to learn from those mistakes, to grow beyond them, to serve balance more wisely because he understands now what happens when certainty replaces humility. He felt Orochi's consciousness settling into profound satisfaction, not at victory in combat, but at demonstration that balance served life better than zealotry served ego. The attack on Erebus ends now. Chris and his followers will submit to Free Jaffa justice for the damage they've caused. The Hakkesshu will conduct internal review of how extremism took root among those meant to serve balance. And all of us, SGC, Free Jaffa, Takare, Asgard allies. We'll examine how Baal exploited legitimate grievances to create division, and will build better systems to prevent such exploitation in the future. O'Neill stepped forward, lowering his P90 completely. "You know, Daniel, when you first merged with a cosmic nature deity, I was worried you'd lose your humanity to divine judgment. Turns out I should have worried about the deity losing its absolutism to your annoying insistence on seeing multiple sides of every issue. Somehow you made primordial judgment complicated. Only you could do that." Daniel laughed, feeling the tension breaking. "Balance was always complicated, Jack. We just spend too much time pretending it isn't, looking for simple answers to problems that don't have them. Orochi's gift wasn't absolute judgment, it was the reminder that sustainability requires constant attention, that wisdom includes uncertainty, that power serves best when it's willing to be questioned." As medical teams began treating the wounded and Free Jaffa elders arrived to begin the process of reconciliation and justice, Daniel felt something shift in his merged consciousness. Orochi's primordial awareness and his human perspective weren't just coexisting anymore, they'd truly become one being, neither purely divine nor purely mortal, but something new. Something that understood that balance required both cosmic perspective and ground-level compassion, both ancient wisdom and current context, both judgment and mercy. The test wasn't over. Baal still schemed in the shadows. System lords still enslaved worlds. Environmental damage still occurred across the galaxy. The work of balance never ended. But today, they'd proven something crucial, that primordial judgment merged with human wisdom could stand against zealotry and win not through superior force, but through demonstrating that nuanced truth served life better than absolute certainty. The galaxy was watching. And for the first time in 10,000 years, Orochi's judgment showed the universe what balance actually looked like when given form. 3 years after the confrontation on Erebus, Daniel Jackson stood once more on P4X 639, the dead world where his journey with Orochi had begun. The ancient temple was gone now, collapsed during the initial release and never rebuilt. But the planet itself had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible when SG-1 first discovered the seal. Where barren stone had stretched for millennia, green now grew. Not naturally, the planet's ecosystem had been murdered too thoroughly for natural recovery. But through the combined efforts of Hakkesshu environmental restoration, Asgard biotechnology, and Free Jaffa agricultural expertise, life had returned to a world the ancients had left for dead. It was a small victory in a galaxy still scarred by conflict and exploitation. But it was a victory nonetheless. Reflecting on our origins, Shermie approached through the new-growth forest, electricity crackling with more control than it had 3 years ago. She'd become the primary liaison between Hakkesshu and the Free Jaffa nation, helping newly liberated worlds build sustainable civilizations rather than simply replacing gold tyranny with different hierarchies. Something like that. Daniel's voice still carried harmonic resonance when Orochi's consciousness surged forward, but the merger had stabilized into something so integrated that he rarely thought of himself as two beings anymore. Remembering what I feared this would become versus what it actually is. And which reality do you prefer? The complicated one. Daniel smiled, gesturing to the planet around them. I thought Orochi would either consume me or that I'd corrupt divine judgment beyond recognition. Turns out we needed each other, cosmic perspective tempered by human compassion, human growth accelerated by primordial wisdom. We became something neither of us could have been alone. A familiar ring transport activated nearby, and Thor materialized with 2 other Asgard scientists. The cloning crisis hadn't been solved, that required generational work, but collaborative research with Hakkesshu environmental specialists and Earth's biological sciences had provided new approaches that showed genuine promise. Dr. Jackson, the High Council asked me to inform you that our latest generation of clones shows 15% less genetic degradation than previous iterations. Thor's large eyes showed something approximating satisfaction. Your merged consciousness's insights about biological diversity as fundamental rather than optional to sustainable systems have proven invaluable. The Asgard are beginning to understand what we lost when we prioritized technological transcendence over biological maintenance. I'm glad we could help, Commander. Though I should point out that the insights came from combining perspectives. Asgard's scientific method plus Orochi's ecological awareness plus human adaptability. None of us alone had the complete answer. Indeed. Which brings me to the Council's formal proposal. Thor gestured, and a holographic display materialized showing a network of worlds connected by lines of data. The Asgard wished to expand our environmental partnership into formal alliance. We propose establishing joint monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Asgard sensors detecting imbalances, Hakkesshu specialists assessing ecological damage, SGC teams providing intervention when necessary. Free Jaffa contributing ground-level expertise. A true coalition serving sustainable galactic development. Before Daniel could respond, the Stargate activated. Through it stepped a delegation that 3 years ago would have been unthinkable, Bratak leading Free Jaffa representatives, Jacob Carter channeling Takare diplomatic protocols, and most surprisingly, a system lord. You, eldest of the Goa'uld, approached with the dignity of genuine age. His empire had contracted significantly over 3 years as the Free Jaffa rebellion spread and other system lords fell to internal conflicts or external pressures. But he'd survived by doing what few Goa'uld could, adapting. Lord Orochi, I bring unexpected news. Yu's voice carried neither the arrogance typical of system lords nor false humility. Just straightforward assessment. Baal is dead. His clones have all been systematically eliminated by a coalition of his own underlords who grew tired of his schemes. The last of the old guard system lords, those who believed in absolute dominance through false divinity, are gone or powerless. A new generation rises, and they face a choice. What choice? Daniel asked, though Orochi's consciousness had already sensed the answer. Whether to continue the old patterns until rebellion or entropy destroys us all, or whether to adapt to a galaxy that no longer tolerates parasitic exploitation. Some among the younger system lords have observed your coalition's success. They've seen Free Jaffa worlds prospering. They've witnessed Earth's technological advancement through cooperation rather than conquest. And they wonder, you paused, and for the first time Daniel saw genuine uncertainty in a Goa'uld's expression. They wonder if balance might serve even parasitic beings better than constant warfare. You're asking if Orochi's judgment extends to Goa'uld who choose sustainability over exploitation. I ask if there is space in your coalition for beings whose very nature is parasitic. But who might channel that nature toward symbiosis rather than slavery? The Takare have shown it's possible. Perhaps others could learn similar paths, given guidance rather than condemnation. Daniel felt Orochi's consciousness wrestling with the question. Everything in the primordial deity's nature screamed that Goa'uld represented irredeemable imbalance. But 3 years of merger had taught both consciousnesses that absolute judgment served ego rather than balance, that even the most corrupt systems could evolve if given reason and opportunity. The coalition's purpose is serving sustainable galactic development, Daniel said slowly, choosing words that represented true merger rather than either consciousness dominating. If Goa'uld wish to participate, they must accept the same standards as everyone else. Environmental monitoring of their operations. Voluntary symbiosis with willing hosts. Abandonment of false divinity claims. Contribution to collective welfare rather than individual empire building. Can you accept those terms? Yu's expression was unreadable. The terms would require fundamental changes to Goa'uld psychology and culture. Many would refuse, would see such acceptance as weakness. But some, he glanced at the restored ecosystem around them. Some might recognize that evolution serves survival better than extinction. I will carry your offer to those with ears to hear. As you departed, Bratak approached with a rare smile crossing his weathered features. In all my years, I never thought I would witness a system lord asking permission to learn sustainability from those he once enslaved. You have changed the galaxy, Daniel Jackson. You have changed it without conquest, without overwhelming force, without becoming the very thing you opposed. We all changed it together, Master Bratak. Daniel gestured to the assembled group, Asgard, Takare, Free Jaffa, Hakkesshu, and some were monitoring through sensors, the SGC teams who'd started this journey. That's what balance actually means. Not one consciousness, one civilization, one solution dominating all others. It means diverse perspectives cooperating toward shared sustainability. It means accepting complexity rather than forcing simplicity. It means constant work rather than final judgment. Carter's voice came through his radio, warm with affection that transcended their professional relationship. Daniel, we're receiving reports from the monitoring network. 73 worlds now participating in voluntary environmental oversight. 12 new Free Jaffa colonies requesting Hakkesshu advisors. And the Asgard biotechnology integration is being adopted by 17 allied civilizations. Whatever we feared when you merged with Orochi, this isn't it. This is actually working. It's working because we kept questioning it, Daniel replied. Because we never assumed we had all the answers. Because we accepted mistakes and learned from them rather than pretending infallibility. He looked at the forest around him, imperfect, still struggling, but alive on a world that had been dead for 10,000 years. It was a metaphor for everything they'd built. Not perfect balance, but living systems working toward sustainability through constant adaptation and cooperation. Chris emerged from the forest, his crimson eyes now carrying humility instead of zealous certainty. The warrior had spent 3 years in service to free Jaffa colonies, rebuilding what his extremism had damaged, learning that sustainable systems required patience rather than purity. He'd become one of the coalition's most effective advocates precisely because he understood the cost of zealotry firsthand. Lord Orochi, the restoration teams report that P4X-639's ecosystem has reached critical mass. It can now sustain itself without external support. The dead world lives again. Then we've come full circle, Daniel said softly. From releasing imprisoned judgment to proving that judgment serves life better than death, growth better than stagnation, cooperation better than domination. He felt Orochi's consciousness flowing through their shared awareness, not separate from his own thoughts anymore, but so integrated that distinguishing human from divine had become meaningless. They were balance incarnate, neither purely one nor the other, but synthesis that exceeded both original forms. The Stargate activated again, and through it came O'Neill, leading a team that included new faces, younger officers who'd joined the SGC after Orochi's merger, who'd never known a time when primordial judgment didn't advocate for environmental responsibility alongside military necessity. Daniel, Hammond wants you back at the SGC for strategic planning. Apparently, some system lords actually took you seriously and are requesting coalition membership. We need to figure out protocols for accepting former parasitic overlords into a sustainability alliance without everyone involved losing their minds. That's going to be complicated, Daniel acknowledged. Yeah, well, you made complicated your specialty. O'Neill's grin carried genuine warmth. Come on. We've got a galaxy to keep balanced, one impossibly complex negotiation at a time. As they prepared to gate back to Earth, Daniel took one last look at the forest he'd watched grow from dead stone. Orochi's consciousness whispered through their merged awareness, not in words, but in the fundamental understanding that had guided the deity across epochs. Balance was never achieved. It was constantly pursued, constantly adapted, constantly reimagined as circumstances changed and systems evolved. The work never ended. The questions never stopped. The need for wisdom, compassion, and willingness to admit mistakes never diminished. But that was okay. Because the alternative, absolute certainty, static perfection, final judgment, was death disguised as divinity. Real balance required accepting that sustainability was a journey rather than a destination, that wisdom included uncertainty, that power served best when tempered by humility. 3 years ago, Daniel Jackson had merged with a primordial deity to prevent catastrophe. Today, he understood that the merger hadn't been about gaining power or achieving perfect judgment. It had been about learning that balance required holding multiple truths simultaneously. That humans could be both destructive and creative, that civilizations could evolve beyond their worst impulses, that judgment served life better when it included mercy rather than demanding purity. The galaxy was still a dangerous place. System lords still schemed. Environmental damage still occurred. Conflict still erupted. But now, at least, there was a coalition working towards something better. Not perfect. Not absolute. But better. And in a universe where perfection was impossible, better was enough. Daniel stepped through the Stargate, carrying primordial wisdom and human compassion in perfect merger, ready to face whatever challenges came next with the understanding that balance was the work of lifetimes, not the achievement of moments. The dead world behind him lived again. And across the galaxy, in thousands of small ways, other worlds were learning that sustainability served survival better than exploitation, that cooperation exceeded domination, that balance, complex, imperfect, constantly adapting balance, was the only path worth walking among the stars. Orochi's judgment had returned to the galaxy. Not as destruction, but as teaching. Not as absolute verdict, but as constant question. Not as power demanding submission, but as wisdom inviting growth. And that made all the difference. Indeed. More stories await.